Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Tuesday, May 17th combined study session regular meeting of the Board of Education. At this time, I would like to make note that all board members are present, and I would also like to have you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. We have some people here.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. We have a special guest this evening tonight. We're honored to introduce a student from Roundtree Elementary, Anaya Hensley. Anaya, would you come forward, please? Anaya is a 4th grade student at Roundtree, and she's in Miss Melissa Wheeler's classroom. Anaya was selected by her principal, Mrs. Misty Ramsey, who's here this evening, because Anaya is caring, reflective, and works hard each and every day. If you're here to support Anaya, would you please stand so we can acknowledge you as well? Thank you for being here. Anaya, whenever you're ready, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance if you're able to.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The flag is backwards.
Oh, you're right. We'll continue this evening with our Honoring Excellence. We are pleased tonight to introduce you to the 2022 Missouri Scholars Academy participants. Missouri Scholars Academy is a 3-week residential summer program held on the University of Missouri Columbia's campus for 330 of Missouri's gifted high school juniors. The process to be chosen is very extensive and rigorous. To be eligible for consideration, students must rank among the top 5% of juniors from each of our 5 high schools. They are notified in September that they qualify to begin the application process, which includes taking the PSAT in October. The next step in the process requires students to submit applications, including reference letters, essays, and other supplemental information. SPS team, including a representative from each of our high schools, scores the anonymous essays. The highest scoring students are eligible to apply to the Missouri Scholars Academy. This year, SPS was allowed to nominate 19 students, including at least one from each high school. The final step in this long process is for the Missouri Scholars Academy to score the essays and reference letters submitted by each of the qualifiers. Students selected are then notified of their acceptance. Of the 19 from SPS who applied, 10 of our students were selected. We have some of those students with us tonight. If you're here this evening and I call your name, please come forward. Representing Central High School are Quincy Alberhusky, Darla Bauer, Cole Broder, Kira Chin, and Allison Laurie. Representing Glendale High School is Lorelei Hardison. Representing Kickapoo High School are Cole Dobbs, Nicholas Fink, and Catherine Lee. Representing Parkview High School is Anna Jeffries. Please join us in congratulating these outstanding students. Here we're going to take a photo of Dr. Layton and Dr. Becker.
Who's getting younger, or are we getting more senior?
Congratulations. And now we're pleased to share our monthly Keep On Growing recognition. Our video tonight shares the story of an employee who has stepped up to make sure things operate smoothly as we provide meals to our students at McGregor Elementary. Let's watch this month's video.
My name name's Ruth Chaplin. I'm the lead nutrition specialist here at McGregor Elementary School. Went to the Army when I was 19, and I went through boot camp in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I just go from my military training. I usually work from the hardest down to the easiest. In the past, I've had to step up and actually take over the management role over not just one school, but 3 schools.
Ruth started with us as a lunchroom aide, which is a 2-hour position. It's the person in the cafeterias that helps students get lined up and open their milks or yogurts. She's grown from there. You know, she started working in the kitchen for a couple of years, and now she's the kitchen lead. And now we're looking at her to become one of our multi-site elementary managers. Having the people that want to move up with our department and grow, it's a wonderful opportunity for them.
Ruth is one of those people that truly exhibits growth in everything that she does. What makes Ruth stand out is that she knows every student here by name. They truly feel that they are part of the McGregor family, whether that be from the teacher in their classroom or to Ruth at lunch. They feel that connection here at school.
Our department, as many folks know, has been shorthanded this year, and you would not even know that McGregor sometimes runs with 2 people in the kitchen, and they don't miss a beat. She makes it happen every single day.
The family that I've made here at McGregor just makes my heart happy. It's all for the kids. Everything that I do, all my hard work, my determination is all for these kids.
Ruth, I want to thank you for all that you do to ensure the kids at McGregor Elementary have a nutritious breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You are a superhero every single day, and we appreciate all you do, and I'm glad that you're being recognized today.
Miss Ruth, congratulations. We are so happy for you. This honor is so deserved. You are truly at the heart of McGregor.
Chaplain, would you please come forward? Thank you all, and that concludes our Honoring Excellence for this evening.
Thank you.
Everybody left. I know. Come back. All the fun stuff. So on with our business meeting. So at this time, we'll move on to 1.04, approval of agenda. At this time, we have a motion that the board approve the agenda as presented this evening.
Denise, can I ask a question?
Yes. We have a question.
I obviously not sure how this works, but I have some concerns in getting a lot of clarity on one of the agenda items later, the consent agenda for ACOB in particular. And if I were to motion to table that vote till next meeting, would that have to happen right now?
No, we'll do that when we get to consent agenda. That's 3
It can
points.
be changed once this agenda is approved?
What? We will do that when we come to that part of the board meeting. Right now, it's just to approve the agenda as it's set. If you want to make a change to, or if you want to do something different.
That's what I'm asking. Is this a change? Is this a change to this agenda? If I wanted to motion to take that portion and say, let's table that, the vote portion of that for next
We
meeting, would that,
Yeah, we would do that when we get to 3.0 consent agenda.
okay.
So right now, we're just looking for, to approve the agenda as presented for the rest of the evening.
Okay.
So do I have a motion to approve our agenda for the rest of the evening?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Sharita. Do you have a second? I'll second. Okay, Danielle. And so at this time, we just need to vote on our agenda for the continuation of the evening.
Don't mind vote.
Oh, sure. So, yes. I forgot, Scott's still not on. He doesn't have a computer yet, so. Scott voting aye. And here comes Scott's computer.
All right, Rod, thank you. Joining the meeting. All right, good. You voted.
Did you get it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
DIT.
I'll wait till see.
Just in time. DIT.
Is that registering Steve's? Okay.
Right.
So can you tell us if the motion passed?
Steve, can you tell us how he's voting?
Oh, Steve, can you tell us your vote? And Tammy can.
I approve.
Yeah, you get to prove there, too.
Oh, here we go.
Sometimes it logs me out. Fudge and everything.
There we go.
Okay.
I'm back.
Goes to sleep.
Sorry about mine.
Sometimes they take a break. The computers take a break on us whenever we're having fun. Okay. Motion carries. So we will move on to our 2.0, our public comments. So let me read a little something for you because we do have some public comments this evening. So the Board of Education welcomes comments about the issues being discussed. The board uses this time in our meeting to listen to the public, but we will not comment or engage with the public during this meeting. The board allows for up to 10 speakers per public comment period. The board chair will call on individuals in the order in which they signed up. Substitutions are not permitted. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and will be timed by the board secretary. And please watch the screens if you're speaking because it will give you a timer. Comments must be acceptable for a business and family-friendly environment. Inappropriate language, gestures, or personal attacks will not be tolerated. It is inappropriate to address the board about individual students or individual staff members by name in open meeting. If you have concerns about individuals, these concerns should be addressed through the appropriate administrative supervisors, either in the schools or in the district office. If you have materials that you want to share, please place them in a tray on the podium, and they will be distributed to board members following the meeting. So at this time, I would like to invite our first speaker, Jasmine Allen, to the podium. Is Jasmine here? Okay, Jasmine is not here. If she comes in later, we will give her an opportunity to speak. Next is Kyler Sherman Wilkins.
Good evening. Thanks for allowing for me to give comments. So my name is Kyler Sherman Wilkins. I'm an assistant professor of sociology at Missouri State University, strong supporter of public schools, and steadfast advocate of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to start by just commending the SPS on their reversal and allowing a couple of our students to don an eagle feather in their cap for graduation. I know it's a really difficult balancing act, ensuring that there's standardization of regalia on the one hand, while also acknowledging that certain groups need to acknowledge their heritage, and I think it was the right decision to do. I would be remiss to say that slavery is the original sin of the United States, but the founding of this country also occurred after the genocide of indigenous people, so it's really important to allow people to celebrate that heritage. Speaking of the right thing to do, I was here the last meeting at which I called on the board and SPS more broadly to make a proactive statement of support for our trans youth. The legislative session is over, and fortunately, the most egregious bills attacking our trans youth did not pass. However, there's strong reason to believe that these will be reinserted at the next legislative session. And the reality is we have trans students in this district. We know that trans youth have higher rates of suicide, and we also know that proactive statements of support can lower that suicide and therefore be life-saving. There is precedent for this, including a 2019 statement of support more broadly for inclusivity and equity. So the difference here is we're going to be proactive as opposed to reactive. I would like to reserve my comments for calling out something I think is just worth mentioning. I was frankly embarrassed and ashamed at the last meeting in which one of the public commenters decided to use their time at this podium to disrespect the process of public comments, and specifically attacking our superintendent and disrespecting our board president. I think it's totally shameful, and I just want to reiterate that there are so many people in the community that really do have the back of the superintendent and also the work the board does. I think it just is another example that sometimes women in position of authority, especially women of color, oftentimes are the receiving end of disrespect, frankly, from mediocre men who think that they have the monopoly on the truth. So as far as I'm concerned, keep on keeping on doing the good work on behalf of our students. And again, I really do reiterate the importance of making a proactive statement of support for our trans youth. Thank you.
Alan Kemper.
Good to be back. Good to greet you all again. This is what I'd like to share with all of you. If you have not as yet received one, this is our, we call it our Gospel Constitution book. And as I was here at the last meeting, I held up this book to ask the simple question, please look this way. How much does the truth really matter in our Springfield public schools? I'd like to say that as an agnostic, I looked at the research and I have spent a lot of years digging out the truth, and this is called the Founder's Bible. This is in some public school libraries. Are you familiar with it? This has the quotations of Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, all of our founding fathers, and it tells very clearly that they did their investigation and their research, and they found out the truth is what made this nation, what preserved us, what got us through the horrible conflict of the British trying to invade our privacy, take away whatever freedom we had as colonists, and to make us simply slaves. So if we are not going to stand for the truth, friends, we're all going to be slaves. And our children are going to be slaves, and they will have us to blame. So we have a heavy, heavy responsibility to make sure that we have done our due duty. We have researched privately, and we've done our best to share books that have the truth. And as I say, these founders, in their speeches, they quoted the Bible more than any other human being. John Locke, who they referred to constantly. John Locke's law book was the most popular and well used, and for many, many years, and he made the statement, he said all laws that are contrary to God's word, the Bible, are invalid and cannot be supported. So I hope that you will read this diligently. If you find something you want to challenge me on, you want to question, please do, because I want to make sure that I'm doing my part to say, here's the truth. Here we can do the best we can do under God and for our fellow students to light the way and to make the pathway for them. We do have to make a decision. There's always going to be winners and losers. What's happening at the Supreme Court, the tide is turning. Let's get on the winning side of history. There are so many people praying that a living God will stop what has happened to make us go in this decline. So I appreciate you very much for this time. My contact information's on the back flyleaf. I'll give you extra copies if you want, and you can give to your associates and all your constituents and anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Monday could not be with us, is that correct? Okay. Dr. Robert Olson. Hello.
Dr. Roberts. Okay, how are you all?
God does not give us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. We need to use that. We come through a horrible time. Greatest scam in human history. You know that they've done a study in the UK involving 11 million young people from the ages of 0 to 20. And guess what? You know how many cases of COVID virus deaths they had? 0. Nada. 0. None. Why are we vaccinating our children here in Greene County? Huh? 5-year-old children right now. There's no risk from the virus. What about the vax? I'm with a group. It's called Public Health for Medical Professionals for Transparency. We sued in federal court, FDA, Pfizer. Guess what? We won. And guess what? The vax is poison. It's poison. No one should take it. Certainly not our children. Please, you need to help us. The city managers control public health and the vaccine program here in town. We need to talk with them, reason with them. Let's go over as a group, talk with them. But one thing that's in the vax, you won't believe it, 1p36 deletion syndrome, it's in the vaccine. Severe intellectual disability is in the vaccine. There's hundreds of things that are in the vaccine that should not be in the vaccine. You can read about our group. I've included it here. Let's talk about the hospitals. What's going on in the hospitals with the Fauci protocol? It's a killer. If you want the $175,000 for every death that's quote-unquote COVID-19, you have to follow the Fauci protocol. And it's poisonous. $175,000 here in this state. These hospitals. The COVID test is always positive, false positive. You get admitted to the hospital, you put on remdesivir, it kills half of the people that go on the remdesivir. Renal failure. What about midazolam? We only give that to death row inmates, respiratory depressant, before we kill them in execution. Why is that being used? 96% of the people that get on the ICU ventilator die. This is huge. This is huge. This is our hospitals. It's happening now. I've talked to attorneys and know it's true. The last thing I would like to mention is other countries. 0 cases, 0 deaths.
Dr.
Ivermectin.
Your time is up, so
Is that it?
you can come back at another meeting and finish.
And that's it. Japan and India. 0 cases using 12-cent ivermectin
Your
pill.
time
One
is
pill.
up. You'll have to finish up. Thank you. You want us to have that?
Yeah.
Are you leaving that for us?
Actually for Tammy. No, everybody can use it. And I've sent everything and more on the emails.
Okay. Okay, Emily Bowen Marler.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Emily Bowen Marler. I'm a minister at Brentwood Christian Church and the parent of a child in SPS. As a minister, I'm no stranger to conflict or criticism. I have experienced my fair share of both and have learned a lot in the midst of those experiences. Though I want to run from conflict, one thing I have learned is that not all criticism is bad. To be sure, there are nasty anonymous comments that come my way that are intended to wound, and there are angry criticisms that are tossed my way because I have struck a nerve with something I said during a sermon or in an interview. In the case of the latter, I find it is helpful to uncover what is underneath that person's reaction, to consider where they are coming from, why what I said might have riled them up. And often in those cases, it's not because what I said or did was wrong or contrary to Scripture or anything like that. It's just that I was bumping up against something in their life that made them uncomfortable. And then there are the criticisms that I've received that are constructive and instructive. The criticisms offered in love and not in fear. They were offered to help me see that the way we were doing things in the church perhaps caused unintentional harm, or were not as inclusive of all people as we hoped. These criticisms have helped me grow tremendously and have helped our church grow as we walk in the way of love for all of God's people. Our church strives to be an anti-racist church, but at times we stumble. At times it is hard to face some uncomfortable truths, to open our eyes to the fact that we may not all be on the same page, or we may not all be receiving others' experiences with open hearts. Our church has been an open and affirming place for those in the LGBTQIA+ community, but at times there have been times when our welcome has fallen short, not because we were intentionally unwelcoming, but because we didn't recognize the subtle ways in which those who were trans or non-binary may feel like they weren't fully included in the life of our church. And once our eyes were open to that, we worked to do better, to be better. When I come before the school board to share my thoughts on the importance of the Focus Area 5 diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, it is not because I am calling out school board members for being hateful. It is because I recognize a tendency of those of us who are in positions like yours to do what you can to appease those who are complaining about efforts that make them uncomfortable. We are human beings, and we don't like to feel uncomfortable. We don't like hearing that there are things we have done or not done that may have caused trauma for another person. Though it is tempting to cater to the voices that are loud and fear-mongering, it is important that we listen to the voices of those who are not represented by the majority. It is important for us to listen to the voices of those who have experiences vastly different from our own. I am a better minister because I have listened to the voices of Black colleagues and Black church members. I am a better minister because I have taken seriously the experiences of trans people. I am a better minister because I have made changes in how I live in this world because of what I have learned from those who have to navigate through a hostile landscape where people are targeted for their skin color or their gender identity. And I promise you, you will serve all of our students and our community better if you do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I can't see you guys.
Great.
It's okay. Next, we have Kiki Rover.
Hello, I am Kiki Rover. I'm System Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Borough Behavioral Health. And I am also a parent who has a kiddo in SPS schools. Recently, our news stations, social media pages, and radio stations have been flooded about the most recent hate crimes in California, Texas, and, of course, what went on in New York. As the FBI continues to dig for information on the suspects in California and Texas shootings, we have been given lots of information about the executor in New York, and his name is Peyton Gendron. What we know about Peyton is that he grew up in a small town. He had planned his killing of Black people as early as 5 months ago. He wrote a manifesto and had studied previous hate crime attacks and shootings. He purposely picked the 14208 Buffalo zip code because it was higher in a population of Black people than some of the other cities he looked at. Peyton made a well-thought-out process plan to attack and eliminate Black lives. He did not see the value of diversity. I, like many others, find myself grieving for the lost lives and grieving with the family and community members of the 10 people Peyton murdered. I also find myself wondering if in Peyton's small community, did anyone take the time to teach him about Black lives? Did he have a teacher invested in giving factual historical context for him to learn about Black history as American history? Did he have teachers who valued students of different races, ethnicities, gender identities, cultures, languages, abilities, and did they practice inclusion? I wonder if he had a school board that believed in equity for marginalized students so that they can be their best self, and in turn, he would learn the value of equity and inclusion for all. I am here today to ask that you continue your efforts in training and educating for all SPS employees on the importance of equity and inclusion. I am also asking for more inclusive-based curriculum for all grade levels in the SPS system. Not just for our historically marginalized or our underrepresented students, but also for all the potential Peytons out there as well.
Thank you. Danny Lee Henderson.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I liked what she said, the previous speaker, and my title is Diversity Does Not Discriminate. Diversity should treat each student fairly. Each race, economic status, gender, belief, preferences, academic performance, sports ability should all have the equal opportunity presented for each and every student, as well as the teachers and staff, no matter the nationality and other factors. We must not show favoritism by giving unfair advantages. Each student and faculty should not be bullied. We must not let anyone become discouraged, because that can lead to depression. Safety is of primary concern. We need more teamwork and cooperation and less competition. Prejudice is not acceptance. When we all treat others like we want to be treated, caring concern, learning together in a peaceful atmosphere, respecting each individual's self-worth, valuing their potential contribution to a better world, only then can we succeed. No, diversity does not discriminate. Equal opportunity in our schools will not leave anyone out. May we help them achieve their dreams, and I thank you all for letting me speak.
Thank you. I think I maybe noticed that Jasmine Allen stepped in. Is that correct? That's okay. You can come up. You were on the roster to speak this evening.
Thank you. I was at my daughter's performance. She also attends Springfield Public Schools, and I am also a teacher for Springfield Public Schools and a graduate of Springfield Public Schools. So I came to share two things with you: the importance of equity access and two different things. For music therapy for all students, as it has proven for mental health and trauma, as well as special education, autism, and early childhood. And I've emailed you guys to go about you guys copies so you guys can see the testimonies of the importance of music therapy as an avenue for enrichment for a diverse population. We'll move on now to talk about the importance of equity. I'm sure you all have seen the news. It's very unfortunate, and it reminds me of an experience I had with one of my friends growing up. Her father did not like me for who I was because of the color of my skin, and he would encourage her to not be friends with me. But if it wasn't for our friendship and for us reading, I shared with her from a book I read in high school, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, and I shared with her kind of my experiences of being black in a predominantly white institution here in Springfield, Missouri. And that brought her to change her perspective. She was not going to continue the cycle of hatred, bigotry, and racism that her father had laid out for her. She knew that was better. And so I hope, because in your focus area, 5.11 says, you're going to facilitate learning opportunities for staff and leaders that foster exploration of identity and self and create applications to demonstrate cultural consciousness in their work. I ask when and how this will occur. I've been a part of two different trainings, one with M&EA that was 12 weeks. It opened a lot of new perspectives, as well as Missouri State under Dr. Stewart. I gained some new perspectives from our international students. And then it's also been mentioned about expanding the curriculum. as of right now, it depends on where you're at if you're going to get exposed to different curriculum, and that shouldn't be the case, right? My daughter shouldn't just receive expanded curriculum, so I urge you to examine what are we learning about. And someone had mentioned being colorblind in the melting pot. That's false. Those are negative. I had explained to my friend, well, no, I want you to see me, because you need to value me. That gives you an excuse to not really count my experiences. And so some still desire the assimilation or melting pot where we assume the values, beliefs, and behaviors of particular or dominant culture. And that's not what we want. I want you to see me. I want you to see us and value us. Thank you for your time and letting me speak. You guys have a fabulous evening.
Thank you. Okay, so that completes our speakers for the evening. Okay, so now we will move to consent agenda, which consent agenda does include 3.01, approval of minutes. Let me get back to my screen here. It also, consent agenda includes 4.01, contracts, agreements, change orders, and bids. And it also includes 5.01, which is personnel, elections, promotions, terminations, and employee compensation plan. So let me read a little piece to you and then we'll move forward with this. Executive content, which is putting these three together, 3, 4, and 5, is the Board of Education Policy BDDB agendas, provide that the board utilizes a consent agenda whenever appropriate. Items are placed on the consent agenda that are routine in nature or are among the many decisions that the board has already determined are in the domain of the administration. When the consent agenda is presented to the board for action, the board president will provide the opportunity for any member of the board to request a discussion or removal of any item on the agenda. Any item requested to be removed from the consent agenda by a board member will be placed on the regular agenda or removed from the agenda entirely depending upon the request of the member and the board agreement. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda, which is 3, 4, and 5. So we'll go forward from there.
So moved.
So we have a motion to...
I will second.
And we have a second.
Are you responding to my question from earlier?
So
I'm just confused. I'm just trying to...
Yeah.
But once they do they make the motion in second, she's going to ask for discussion. That's when you're going to ask your question.
So we have a motion on the table to approve the consent agenda items 3, 4, and 5, and we have a second. So now we're going to have discussion. So if someone wants to make some changes to that, so now we're going to discuss that.
So this is the time where if we said we wanted to remove something from it to either be voted on
Yes.
now or later.
We're going to let John, so you're here to answer any questions.
Correct. I can answer questions about the KCOB or consent agenda. But then, yes, at that point, you wanted to vote on this one separately or table it, that you would make that.
Yeah.
So
then we'll go through that process.
Okay, so just to explain.
Yes.
Okay.
This is the
just to
time.
explain what I would like. So maybe you can help me arrive at what the best way.
Yeah, this will be new territory, so we'll go on this together.
With this being a combined meeting, and us not having these issues presented, and then the 2-week gap, and then we vote. I'm considering proposing a motion to delay the vote for 2 weeks. I would like for us to have the discussion just like we ordinarily would, or we have in the past meetings on things, and then vote later rather than have the discussion and vote now.
Okay.
Is this the time to do that?
I think what you're asking to do, I think, is are you asking to pull 4.01 contracts, agreements, and change orders off of consent?
I don't know if pulling is the right language. Well, I want to have the discussion, but I want to vote next week.
But
next
it's,
week.
it would be a motion and a second to remove it from the
Correct.
consent.
And a vote to agree
Correct.
with your motion. So
Correct.
it's not just automatically pulled.
Correct.
Because anything that we take out of consent agreement, then we can have a discussion, because we have the consent so that we can just move it forward.
You can't do both at once. You motion to take it off of the consent agenda, and then we'll treat it just like all the other items here regarding proposed rates and all these other things. And then if it's off the consent agenda, we'll have a discussion, and that's when you can say, I want to wait and vote on this.
At the June 7th, is that what you're thinking? The June 7th meeting? Because we don't meet again until June 7th.
I'm just looking for the proper amount of time to really dive into some of the issues. There's a lot in here, which I think was evidenced by some of the email communication we had that was lengthy, that whoever was asking a lot of those questions and responding to those questions, I think put in a lot of time in a very tight window.
Yeah, I'm not sure
So
they were.
what I'm proposing is,
Not with agenda. They were just, most of those were non-agenda item questions.
Yeah, I'm not sure all of those were
a
pertaining
lot of
to
that was pertaining to this KCOB.
4.0.
And I had more questions myself, and up until this point, as a new board member, a lot of what we've done is
Had 2 weeks.
yes, presented, discussed, and then for me, that's really helpful because I hear the narrative from John or anyone else from staff to get a clear picture, and then that allows me to dive in for 2 weeks and really understand it better, versus having a few days to just read something, then get it presented to me. I'm catching up, and now we have to vote on it right away. If it's something that has a lot of depth to it, which to me, some of these issues do, I would really like to have that length of time, and here we are where we didn't. So I'm saying, what's the best way for me to propose? I obviously can't do this, but propose a motion to say, let's continue our discussion on these items tonight and hear from John, and then vote on it at the next meeting.
Okay, so it's my understanding a couple of options we could have is that you could pull, you could say, not pull, but ask that if you want to make a motion that 4.01 contracts, agreements, change orders, and bids be tabled until our June 7th meeting.
No, removed from the consent agenda.
I'll pull off the consent, be added to.
Just remove from the consent agenda. If that passes, then he can make another motion in order to table it to the June 7th meeting.
Would that allow us to still have the discussion on this meeting? Okay.
By removing it from consent, it becomes the very next regular agenda item automatically
On this meeting.
Yes.
on this meeting.
So
We don't have
That's
to
not going to get to where he.
Yes, it is. We don't vote on it. We still just have the discussion, and then instead of calling it to the vote, we can table it to June 7th.
So my question for you, or Kelly, or for anyone else, is that the KCOB is always a part of our consent agenda. Your concerns about this particular one would not change the fact that in the future, we would also have that on there. So are you asking for it to be removed completely, permanently from the consent agenda, or just for now?
I'm asking that we always have 2 weeks between presentation and vote, starting with this KCOB. I don't know, is that normal that
That is
we
not
have that with
always-
KCOB?
No.
Right, and we don't always have
KCOB is
presentation.
generally,
It's always consent.
Always.
okay. So then, yes, I can only speak to this one now, but it would be my preference that we have more time to look into things like this, because it's our responsibility to approve the budget. There's a lot of money in here and a lot of detail of different things that I almost don't even know where to start with, and need time to know how these things compare to what was budgeted for them, for example. And I think it would be a better process for us moving forward if we are tasked with approving the budget, that we really understand what it is that we're approving. And personally, in the 4 days' time that we've had to look at this, I have not been able to get to a place where I'm comfortable saying, I approve with all these expenditures.
So, and then I'll ask Dr. Mofer to speak. So the board approved the budget last June. So now, from June up to this point, districts and district departments and schools have been incurring expenses. And when you see like purchase orders, they've already ordered the materials, the goods, things have been processed. So I want to make sure it's a clear understanding that business continues, and this is really kind of a ceremonial formality but the expenses have already been incurred. Sometimes even the materials have already been received. And so I want that to be clear.
It's ceremonial, but I take it seriously when I have to say yes to something that I understand what it is I'm saying yes to.
But I want to make sure you understand the purchase orders, we've already said yes to them.
Well, we approved the budget already for
right, because you've already approved it in the budget.
That's
so
a good point, because
sure.
by just reading this in the format that it's in, I don't know how this compares to the budget. I don't know what portion of the budget these go to and how, in the variance of how that budget stands today, for example.
Did you call yesterday to try to get answers to those questions so that we didn't have to delay?
No,
Because I'm going to guess these are time sensitive as well.
That's my point, is that for me, this last 4 days, just uniquely to me, was tight in scheduling for me. And I was not able
I would
to
suggest you
process
abstain, because I don't want to stall the district from doing their, and.
Well, I don't know that we are necessarily stalling. I don't know. We're about to have the discussion, I think, and that would be a
Sure,
chance to ask those questions.
sure. I just don't want to get in a habit of not paying our purchasing orders.
But purchase orders are different than contracts.
Sure.
So I understand what you mean by contracts. So the budgetary aspect of that is for next year. When I see a one-year contract, I'm thinking that's next year. Even though maybe we're paying for it this year, I think of it as next year. So I do want to clarify that purchase orders are different than contracts. Am I right or wrong?
No, that's accurate. So
I understand what, Peter, you're saying about purchase orders, but I don't think, I have specific concerns about contracts that I have asked, and some answers have been provided to me.
So I want to make sure, and Dr. Mulford, please kind of talk about the overall process, but I want to point out, like, for example, bids that we receive as it relates to sealing. And so if this doesn't move forward, projects where you're getting, like today, you got some communications about our grass that needs to be cut, and we are dealing with that. So I'm just saying, once these things get held up, things stop or they don't proceed. And that's why we encourage you to ask questions and let's hold a discussion. But some of it could stop some of the work for the district or postpone things that need to be accomplished. Dr. Mulford?
Yeah, so there's a combination, and we'll dive into a little bit of a discussion, I guess, since we're here, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Excuse me. But, so you do have your purchase orders, and you'll notice on your purchase orders, on the bigger numbers, those are contracts that have already been approved, and typically it is noted the date it was approved. So now it's just a matter of proceeding forward. A lot of the smaller items, as we've talked about before, I believe it's only $75,000 and more that is required to come to the board. But we still bring the smaller amounts just for your information. So it's an informational piece on the purchase order side. So when you look to the contract side, state statute requires that all contracts, regardless of monetary value, be approved by the board. Now, to be quite honest with you, there's a lot of districts that probably don't follow that to a T like we do in our district, but we take it very seriously. And so if the contract comes through, it's vetted through our risk management department and our lawyers to make sure that it has the language that needs to be in there to protect the district. And then prior to even getting to that point, it is vetted through the appropriate administrator or committee or team of people to vet the product, whatever that happens to be. So you'll notice on the greater amount list that it's a mix of things. So there's certainly software renewals on there, but then there are also summer projects that are very time sensitive if we want the work to be completed over the summer. And you'll also notice that a lot of those things went out through the public bidding process that we are required to follow as a Missouri public entity. And so there are some hiccups if we do delay, and I certainly understand Kelly's perspective. Steve probably feels it to an extent too, and I remember our newer board members last year feeling a little overwhelmed at this point of the year.
If I could interject, please.
Yes, sir.
I think the biggest concern overall is, when the stakeholders put us on the board, that we do have an opportunity, or we have the responsibility to look at those contracts. And the question that is posed over here with Kelly, and I share this, and that is it's presented to us, and then we have just a few days. And then I'm thinking, well, that doesn't serve our constituents or stakeholders very well. And so the point would be is that by moving this to the next meeting, It gives us even more time, which would be respectful to our stakeholders, to have our position that we fill, we have a fair opportunity to represent them and be able to make a decision effectively as they put us here to do.
I want to remind everybody, our duty is to our school district, and even though we had voters elect us to this position, it's not like a state representative position. Because we are on a board, our duty is to the district. And I'm going to guess Central High School, which is on the KCOB here, going to the FBLA National Leadership Conference, they probably don't want to hold off on knowing if they can go to that conference or not. And I understand wanting some oversight of the contracts, but there's processes along the way. And as I understand it, all these things are budgeted. It's just now the actual contracts are coming to us for approval after they've gone through legal, after they've gone through the process within the district. So I just want to make that comment, and I know that coming on as a new board member, it's a lot all at once, especially when we've got the new budget coming up in June. But we were elected, and sometimes we've got to take a weekend off when we know we've got a board meeting on Tuesday and go through these and get the questions to the people who can answer those questions over the weekend. And that's the duty that we owe to the district.
You just said that we have the budget approval coming soon, and a lot of these issues that I'm concerned with are contracts for next year. We have not approved that budget yet for next year.
Right.
So how can we approve these things if we haven't approved the budget? So it's not about what someone at Central is going to do next week. We're not talking about purchase orders. And if there's something on here that truly can't wait 2 weeks, then I'd be open to say, let's pull that out. I don't want to slow you down. I just want to have the appropriate time to make big decisions. And all the stuff I'm talking about in here are a lot of things that have been, I'm sure you guys have been working very hard on for quite some time, like throughout the year. So it seems to me like to give us 2 weeks, if you guys have been working all year on something that you know you're going to have to renew a contract for next year, giving us 2 weeks to properly review and understand those things would be prudent.
So, I'm just going to kind of throw out there that as a board, you can give us whatever direction you want to give, or give Dr. Latham whatever direction to give us. But at the same time, I do want to remind the board, you hire the administration to do the work that you are saying that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate the oversight, I really do, and I think you should. And I think the board's, I don't want to make sure I'm not speaking out there, so Dr. Latham, you tell me to be quiet if I get to the wrong point. But I think the board's role is oversight. The board's role is to ask questions, right? But at the end of the day, it's the administration's role to ensure proper processes are followed that align to the board's vision of where they want the district to go. So when you look at the number of contracts that Springfield sees, not even annually, just monthly, I mean, this is pretty standard. I don't think there's any way possible for any of you without being here full-time to truly have a good grasp. There's just not. But what you can do is through these summaries, you can say, I've heard about that. I want to know more. And definitely ask those questions because we want to be as transparent as we can be. But when you look at this total list, there are a lot of things, and I understand the whole adopting a budget and approving things beforehand, and it never seems right. But at the same time, the way our fiscal year runs, if you don't approve some things ahead of time, then you're not going to be able to get it done. And so it's always that striking that balance. But a lot of these things are things that have to occur during the summer, facilities, projects that were bid. I understand the technology pieces on renewal. I can tell you that Dr. Latham is doing the job you hired her to do on that front. And before anything comes to you, we're having multiple meetings. She's grilling us on it. She wants to know the ins and outs. And if it's not the answer she wants, it's not coming to you. So I think there comes a point where you got to trust her to lead that work and follow the vision that you all are setting. And I know it's a lot of talking. I probably should just be quiet. But in the end, if there are some things, and we'd have to sit here and go through one by one, there are some things that if not approved tonight could cause some some delays, or if not approved very quickly in the future.
So my recommendation, and no one has to take my recommendation, of course, would be not to delay our meetings by taking out this 4.01, but instead having the ability to go through it and pulling out individual things. Otherwise, we will be here all night. And again, it's not our job to be accountants on these things. We have our superintendent who's managing those people to do those things. We are here for oversight and asking questions. So if there are things that come up on here that I don't know what they are, I look them up first, and then I say, oh, that's what it is. Or if I look it up and I don't know, then I can call and say, what is this and why are we spending that money? But I do that before the meeting so that we can continue to move this large district forward.
Sharita, I
But
completely agree.
When do you do that? Because I have tried that in past months and not under your leadership, and it's not worked out for me. So can I right now move to, like, how does it work? Because I was under the impression that you can only move things out 24 hours beforehand. And when I have asked in the past for certain line items in the KCOP to be removed, I was told that the best way that is not A, possible, and B, you could just vote no and explain why you can't. Maybe it's just one thing that's hanging you up. So I'm actually confused. I'm sorry, this is not why we're having this discussion, but why we're having it, because you just brought up, hey, can we just pull out certain items? Yeah, why can't we? But I don't think we can. I think you have to do that a day in advance, correct?
No, as I recall, when you have expressed some questions about some things, they've been pulled.
No, it's never been pulled.
So, yes, it has, a previous contract, if you recall, when you called me in advance.
I mean, to remain on the agenda, but to be for...
You mean an agenda item?
To become an agenda item on its own.
That's kind of a
different
discussion.
Oh.
I know what you're talking about.
I think that's what you were just saying right now,
No.
to pull some of them out.
No, just some specific items
to just
off
out
of the
completely.
KCOP.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Oh, to have them not happen at all.
As a part of the consent agenda.
Well, that's what I meant. So that it becomes part of a regular agenda. Is that what you mean, Sharita?
I'm confused now, so.
Well, can we just ask questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
And then we can
clarify one thing before we do that, because Sharita, I do completely agree with you, and I think I've been a little bit misconstrued here. It's not to, again, not to micromanage. It's not to go through each of these things. It's state. You said statute is that we need to approve contracts.
Above
And
$75,000, but we're including.
No, purchase orders above $75,000, all contracts.
All contracts,
So
right, thank you.
if the state has tasked us with approving contracts, I want to take that seriously and know that I'm not just blanketly saying yes to things without understanding them. And my point is, I need more in the time we've been given to make sure that I understand them. And had I had that time, it might be really easy for me to sit here, and I really do love these discussions that we have, and then the time, and then I can come through and say yes.
Okay, so Scott has a question, and then we'll see what we need to do next. Scott?
Do you want a better understanding, more time to get a better understanding of the purpose of the contract, or do you want to read the contract itself?
I don't necessarily want to read the contract itself. There may be times I want to. Right. I'm not saying there's anything on here that I necessarily want to read the contract on. I'm saying I'm reading through a lot of this stuff, and I'm just sitting here saying I have so many questions and I haven't heard it here. Right. And then once he's going to talk, I'm going to have more questions, right, yeah. And that's a really good process for him to present, us to have 2 weeks to answer questions, right, and then vote.
But we don't usually do that.
Talk about
We don't talk about them.
Right.
We may not usually do that. Doesn't mean that it can't be done.
And that was my question to you initially, is that you're asking for this to be taken out of the consent agenda so that it can have a discussion, because we do not.
We can have we can though. When there's a vote and a motion and a second, we've always had an opportunity to ask questions.
Well, and I think to Kelly's point, when we have a study session, we do talk about it. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. He wants them all to be under study sessions, not. Well, this is the combined.
We will take a question. If there's a particular question about the item, we just need the question so we can respond. And that's where we are right now. This is discussion. So if there's a question about one of the contracts, this is where you would ask your question and we will provide a response. So which particular contract do you have a question about?
Well, I was going to wait for, would it be normal for you to more present them first?
No, typically it's
Okay,
just
then I can go
questions.
through one by one, and there were
I
questions
have-
I know that were
actually
submitted
have
over the weekend, then some answers, and.
Before we start
there is more
asking
questions for me.
questions, this is still technically on the consent agenda,
Yeah, right.
and so until it's been moved off the consent agenda, I don't think it's appropriate to go into specific questions.
Following the rules, that's right.
Oh, wait, so we can't have?
You can if you move it off the
Questions?
consent agenda.
Consent agenda means that we are just moving forward.
Right.
But we can ask questions before we vote on it as the consent agenda.
Questions about the consent agenda, whether or not we are going to approve it or not.
So if we vote,
Oh, we can't just ask a question
so
of a
if
specific
the
item?
motion fails to move forward with all of these, with 3, 4, and 5 on consent, that motion fails.
But right now, that's the motion on the table.
There's
Motion
not
on the
technically
table
been a
is to
motion.
move forward, so if that motion fails,
Right, so you're voting now on the motion for 3, 4, and, I had to go back.
to move forward.
To move
So
forward, 3,
if
4,
that
and 5.
fails,
Because it's on consent, we can't go through and ask one-on.
Unless you remove it from the consent agenda, which would take a
Okay,
motion
then
to remove
then
it
that
from the
would raise
consent
a further
agenda.
concern for me, because I do think we should be able to ask.
Then motion to
But
remove
I
it from
have
the consent
asked,
agenda.
no, wait, I have asked questions before, have I not? I usually have questions.
In
So are you
board
saying-
meeting?
Wait. So like, let's say, I actually have a question. I have a question about Discovery Ed streaming. Are you saying that I can't ask it unless we remove it off of the consent agenda?
During the board meeting,
I do believe in
Correct me
the
if I'm wrong.
combined sessions that I've been a part of,
yeah,
Here.
we have allowed questions
yeah, since we're
before we
combined.
voted on it. Yeah.
Okay, so
And a
it is
combined
allowed.
session
I know I
only.
have.
Oh, yeah.
Is that appropriate? Let me clarify something here. Here's where I think
a long conversation.
there's always the bottom line. And so I think what Kelly's point he's getting to here is that, is this our first combined session with new board members? Is this
Yes.
our first?
May is,
Okay.
because it's always
So
after graduation.
the combined session that we have this month in May, because of the graduation, end of the year, and so we bring everything together. So what has always happened in the past with our new board members, it's every year. This is the first time that we put study session and regular together. So that's why it's kind of tough, because we get board documents on Thursday or Friday, and so that gives us 4 days. Those of us that are used to that know that in that 4-day period of time, we have lots of reading and lots of thinking and lots of questions to formulate and push out to the administration and get that back and read. So for our brand-new board members, I probably did not do a good job in letting them know this is going to be a really intense weekend to review your materials and get those questions back. So I think what Kelly and maybe Steve, I don't know, maybe faced this weekend was this intense amount of time and effort to get ready for this meeting tonight because of its combined. Now, we only have a few combined sessions per year, so you won't face this without having a 2-week period of time again until, when do we have another combined? August. August. And, okay, so we'll do a better job prepping for that. So I think that's where we are tonight, and some of these questions that you maybe felt like you didn't have time to formulate and ask. So that's where we
Didn't we
are.
decide that KCOB is always presented this way, whether it's
But
combined?
it comes on study session, so then you have your 2 weeks.
But I thought we decided that a few minutes ago.
Well,
that
you have your two-
KCOB does not have a 2-week gap, that it's just.
When we don't have a combined session.
We don't have.
Okay,
It always
so
comes
if
in
we have a
study
study session, we will.
Then you have
we will
your
see
2
KCOB and then
weeks.
vote.
Yeah, you have your
Good.
2 weeks to ask questions.
Okay, so this is unique to
And
a
then you
combined.
vote, on
Okay.
regular.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Okay, so I think that's kind of part of what's going on here. Okay.
Okay.
Scott.
Couple things. This is from April 6th to the 10th.
We still haven't approved,
Okay, all right. I just had a question about the process.
oh, the
Go ahead.
process, not one of these?
No, not one of these things.
I'm sorry.
Mhm. Oh, no, that's all right. Just, so, and we get it on Friday, but the 10th, and which is the 14th, what's stopping us from just getting it as soon as,
Getting it sooner,
getting it sooner?
like on a Thursday?
Like on a Tuesday, from that 5:10 or
You
whatever.
would ask the,
Talking about the
because the
entire
work
board packet?
No, the
No,
KCOB.
generated.
The KCOB.
KCOB, yeah. So, we can get it as early as you want. Thing is, there's always going to be additions, right? So even if we have it a week ahead of time or 2 weeks ahead of time, there's always going to be a few other contracts that get wrapped up that get it added on, and Tammy typically will send something out saying, hey, some things have been added.
Yeah.
So really, it's just turnaround time. So these combined meetings are usually a little earlier in the month.
Yeah.
I think it was March when the study session was canceled.
It was
We
later.
still sent the KCOB
Yeah.
out,
We did.
but remember, our later session was normal time.
All right.
So our contracts department was already putting that together, got notification, the study session was canceled, and we went in and still sent that out for you to start reviewing. So, Scott, I think those are conversations we can have on these regular sessions, trying to get a preliminary out at least a week ahead of time. So you guys can start combing through it and then give an update when the board packet goes out.
And I have a few other comments, but they're not for here.
Okay, last process question. So moving forward, if there is an item that we want pulled, so I have this correct, it will get, if we can ask for it to be removed, like I did one time, but not to have its own, it can't be part of regular business agenda. It has to remain as a consent agenda. So I was under the impression that you can move it onto its own line if you want.
So Denise, actually, what she read was, if an item is pulled from consent, it becomes the first item
So it can be.
under regular
Okay.
business automatically.
And can
So-
you confirm the timing of when and how it has to be?
Is that a day, yeah, what is the timing on
Does
it?
it happen in this meeting, or does it have to happen before?
It has happened before.
This happens in this meeting. I mean,
So if
in the
right
same
now,
meeting.
we said,
It's publicly posted, correct?
No,
Or
you're saying two different.
Yeah, we're saying two different
It can happen before it's publicly posted, but it can also be pulled from the consent agenda during the meeting with a majority vote of the board.
and that's any of these line items that I'm looking at.
I got
So
it.
if you wanted to look at
So I can
line
put
item for
item
brain
A,
popper on here.
how would one do that? I vote motion to have item A removed from consent and placed as a regular business item? Is that how it would be done?
I think so.
Am I saying that? As a
See the KCOB.
first item would be
So you're saying number-
6 or?
Which one you want?
No, I don't. I'm just saying if I wanted to do that.
She would
as an example.
identify the item
Give
she
us a
wants to
notice,
remove.
give us,
Yeah.
it'd be nice to have a notice.
So like in Kelly's situation, he would say, I would like to request item 4.01 be removed from the consent agenda.
Now, that would be the entirety of KCOB.
Oh, that's the entire.
Within the KCOB, can we remove line
Yeah,
items?
can you remove a line
So he's
item?
talking about, okay, so she's talking about, like, number one is the KCOB, 15,000 to 499.
let's say-
Number two, purchase order. Number three, KCOB.
No, I meant like, let me just pull
You
the
just mean
first one out.
one
She means
specific
one
item.
contract with
Very-
KCOB.
Yeah, the very first one is, whatever that is.
She wants to remove a contract from consent agenda. I think it's okay to make that motion to just remove that one contract.
one
is
do
what she-
that?
Okay.
Right.
You're saying within the contents of item number one of the KCOB.
Yeah.
For example, this is an example, don't nobody freak out, is if we, Kansas City Audio Visual Inc., you're saying if you wanted to request to remove that particular
Yes.
item and vote on it separately?
Yes.
Is that
that possible?
possible? It is possible. I mean, unless
When
there's
is the
something that the
time?
board, previous board practices. I guess I want to separate Robert's Rules of Order and previous board practice. I'm only going to speak to Robert's Rules. Madam President will need to speak to previous board practice and whatever decisions were made previously.
I mean, I think that would be something that it would be nice in advance for you to have a discussion with administration as to why you want to pull that.
Which is all
and
the more
what your
reason that
questions
more
are.
than 4 days, where 2 of them are weekend.
What, yeah.
There.
Well, anyway, you could have that, because this administration is great about getting back to you very quickly, and they could perhaps answer whatever question it is you have about that, because you may find out, oh, okay, well, that's not what I thought it was, or it is what I thought it was. And so you can have that pulled and then put on the agenda, because frankly, there are things on there that I don't want to see go, but I want on there, and as a one of 7, I want the opportunity to vote to keep it on. So that's, we've got to remember, there's 7 of us. So that would be a way of letting the getting your questions answered. And then if there's still something you want pulled off, then pull off and let us know, and we'll get it put it on the agenda as new business.
And I think my request can prevent some of that dirty messiness if we just, like Scott said, if we can just find a way to get this stuff sooner. And I think we saw that this weekend with the amount of questions, and whoever was answering those questions put a lot of time into that.
And that only happens again during the study session, during the combined session.
Correct, okay, good.
And so we have that practice because of what you just said, we have this practice in place so we don't have all these individual things that could occur. And the reason why it is like it is this week, this time, is because of the combined session, and you just have the 4-day.
Right, but there was only one email, and that had questions that would truly remain to the board agenda. The other 2 emails were questions that a board member had submitted last week that we were responding. It just took us time to get all the answers. So the email yesterday in reference to, and it said board member questions to the agenda, there were only 5 or 6 of those true questions. No other questions came in from board members about this particular agenda item. So I just want to make sure you separate the lengthy 2 emails, like I said, were previous email questions.
Thank you.
So if, for example, and again, Kansas City Audiovisual, if, let's say I asked for it beforehand, and it would be the discretion of the superintendent and the president to decide to remove that, and then it would go under new business.
New business, right.
I just want to understand this.
It will be treated like we treat other contracts. So if you think about the other contracts, like last month when you signed the contract for the ERP system, remember, because of the value amount, it had to be a certain item. It would be treated like just another contract that has a certain value.
And of course, the president can deny that request.
They can deny that
And
request.
that's when it comes to a majority vote of the board.
Oh, and if they deny it, the board member, let's say me, can say, okay, fine, I'm good. Or I can choose to bring it at the open board meeting. And when would be the time to introduce that? At the beginning of the agenda approval or during consent agenda? Because once you approve the agenda, it's set, so you can't add anything to it. Or can you do it during the consent agenda?
So we've had this conversation.
I know, but we've had so much talk tonight that I'm confused now.
At the approval of agenda, that's when you would ask
at the beginning
to have another something added to it.
So at the very
But you don't
beginning.
have to wait that long.
What you do it beforehand. But if it gets refused, so that everybody knows, if it gets refused, if you felt passionate about it and strong enough about it, you bring it up at the beginning of the board meeting.
And just like recently,
I think I got it.
there was a request to add something to the agenda.
Okay.
Or this evening, and there was a poll, and there was a majority of the board agreed, and it happened. Okay? Okay. All right.
So now
where
we can
we
move
are
on to
now.
discussing some of these things, and I know you have questions.
I guess I have questions.
I can
But we can go in
piggyback.
order. It doesn't have to be me.
Well,
We vote on.
We haven't voted on
Okay,
any.
so here's where we are. Let me back us up.
Hold
So
this
here's
off
where we
the
are.
agenda.
We have a motion on the table to approve consent. We have a second to approve consent. Now we're at discussion. So you can, who has a question?
Discussion because it's a combined meeting.
Yes.
Technically, apparently so, because
We're gonna go
historically,
with
yes,
Right, let's go,
allow
let's, I
conversation.
know we're doing it differently,
Yep.
but
We're doing a little
let's
differently 'cause
answer
it's
questions that, so we can
Because it's
take the work of the business.
Yep.
District.
Can we do it in order, and you're welcome to ask
Whatever
the
you
questions
want.
you ever make.
Kelly, let me be president, please. And we'll
I'm not
take it.
trying to
You can
intercede on
start. You can start if you would like,
I am offering
because you may have.
that some of her it might be more, it might be to everyone's benefit if she asks her questions. And
How
then
many
I
do
can
you
piggyback
have?
off of that, 'cause
I just have a follow-up to the question I asked that you answered. I have
She just has one, so if you want to start.
maybe 2.
I was thinking you may have the more, and that might catch
I'll be happy to
yours
kick
out.
one off. Okay, the first thing, CDW government. Why are, I'm curious, we're purchasing 225 anywhere charging carts. Does that have anything to do with the sort of change in policy to Chromebooks in elementary schools?
Yes, that's correct. So with the elementaries keeping laptops on site next year, we'd have charging carts so that we can charge them overnight.
That was in the information.
Ready to go for the next day.
last board meeting.
We don't, most of our buildings don't have enough electrical ports and things like that to plug them up.
So this would be an example of how do I look at, because we're being asked to approve $483,000. It was apparently something you didn't know you were going to need until a month ago, or 2 weeks ago. So how do I look at this and know that that's accounted for in the budget?
Within the
No,
budget,
could you? I mean, that's a fairly significant expense that just came out of nowhere. So it seems to me that, like, if we're being asked to approve this, that there would be another column here that would say what part of the budget it's coming out of, and then some sort of reconciliation to the budget, like a variance number or something.
So this is next year's budget, correct, Bruce? Oh, there it is. So this is next year's purchase or this year?
This would be a purchase, most likely out of
2023.
So this is something that, as we're finalizing the budget that we're going to bring back to you
So next year's.
next month, this will be accounted for in those purchases.
I mean, it says funded by FY23 Information Technology Capital Funds. And I think, and it's a valid question, how do we know?
That answers part of my
Yeah,
question.
where, what section of budget is that coming from? That's
And
a fair question.
I gotta add something to that, though. As somebody who actually reads everything.
No, really?
Many of these charging cards were surplused in the year that I've been on this board. I just had to put it out there. So,
We're moving forward.
we're moving forward, but we had these all at one point, Bruce would know that, and then they, we're moving forward. Okay.
Get surplus. So, John, let me just say that
Sorry.
each year, the departments have a set budget that they receive, and then they make expenditures within that budget, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And there's going to be an element of consistency in a lot of those budgets. So as we're planning for next year, Bruce, Travis, people like that, they come to us with the things they know they're going to need. We run through those projected costs and what we are very confident will remain in the budget, and we let them get a head start on those purchases. They hold back on the additional things to determine, well, we wait and determine what the final budget actually is, and then that's when they'll proceed with those other purchases and projects.
It's an odd way to do a budget, but having been in charge of the Title I budget for a number of years, so you have to have a projected budget, so you know how much money you will come in, but you have to spend it. So you have to hire ahead sometimes before that budget comes in. So yes, it is unusual the way this works, but so those are good questions. Kelly, keep going. That was a good one.
I was looking for something else, trying to find it in here. If someone else wants to ask a question, go ahead.
And I think the questions are great, and it's new board member learning, and it's maybe even second-year board member learning. And when Kelly and I had a chance to visit today, and he was talking about how this is a lot of stuff in 4 days, it took me back. Yes, it is a lot, and so we'll perhaps talk about that possibility of the next combined meeting of getting
At least a draft.
at least this part a little bit, so you have a few more nights to do your homework instead of 4. So, Scott.
I'm just, another suggestion is a better explanation of why we need to approve it for FY23 now. For example, just a blurb in there, a sentence, approved now to order on 7/1/22 when the budget's approved, or when we could technically start spending the 22-23 school budget, so we can have it on hand for the 22-23 school, beginning of the 22-23 school year that starts August, 17th or whatever it is. Just a little blurb in there about that, why.
Yeah, we have to have it there. When school starts, it's got to be there.
But it's not said in this.
Yeah.
It's implied. I guess we have to apply.
Yeah,
Right.
it is applied.
Right.
And I think our descriptions overall, both on purchase orders and contracts, is something we're definitely trying to improve upon, so that it answers a lot of questions in the description.
Right.
I know that's feedback we got from a lot of you that
Already
were.
improved upon greatly.
Yeah.
Do you not think? I mean, it could get better, but it's already.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Compared to last year.
Incorporate. Other questions?
So I had asked about Brain Pop and Discovery Ed education streaming, since both of them are nonfiction content and are supplemental resources to curriculum, I'm not clear as to why we need both, because Discovery Ed is K-12, Brain Pop is K-5 with science in 6 through 8, and then also used at high school level and special education classes. But since Discovery Ed is K-12, so it runs the gamut, and they're both nonfiction, and they're written into the curriculum as a supplemental resource, how is it determined, what's the advantage to having both?
I'm going to kick this over to my partner in crime over here at the table, Dr. Holt.
And right, the specificity of how they're used per curriculum coordinator, right?
Oh, sorry. My mic's on, could they not hear me?
So the specificity of how they're used per curriculum coordinator, they'd be able to give you the exact places that it falls within, right? But what we gave you in the answer yesterday was the places that it's most frequently used. And so those pieces, specific to Brain Pop and specific to Discovery Ed, are the places that it is utilized within the current curriculum.
So it's determined by the curriculum coordinator? Is that how it's determined?
Yes.
Okay. And I understand that you're analyzing each software and curriculum resource prior to bringing it to the board. And that, the cabinet reviews the usage, duplication, cost effectiveness, and that this results in that this has resulted in elimination of some renewals and that others are being renewed, such as Brain Pop and Discovery Ed. So, and I don't think there was just enough time, because I did ask this question. I just think there wasn't enough time maybe for you to come back. Which software programs didn't make the cut?
Bruce could elaborate on that.
So one specific that we cut relates back to the universal screener. So we had 6 various softwares off that. So that was Lexio, which is the adaptive software for K-5 for reading. Then Dreambox, which was the adaptive software for K-5 math. Reading Plus, which is the adaptive software for our middle schools and our high schools reading. Then Manga High, which was a math program for upper grade levels as well. Mastery Connect, which was a formative assessment tool. And then, that was 5. Number 6 was Prodigy. Okay. And so by consolidating all the universal screener pieces with the adaptive software, that's where those reductions.
Okay, thank you. And are these items that are on the KCOP?
Yeah.
There's one more item, but I'm going to let if anybody else has any questions. No questions? Go ahead. Yeah. So this isn't a question, but so I'm moving forward with the supposition that we're going to vote on this. And for me, these software purchases, this should come as to no surprise to anyone, is, for me, it's, the whole idea is the provision of essential supplies for our students. And it appears that there's insufficient direct funds for reading material in some of our buildings. And I've put this out there already. And that there's been proposed solutions by building leaders to ask PTA to include it in their initiatives, or for building staff to write grants. And I realize that there's funds that go to buildings, but like everything in life, there's never enough. They're usually consumed in basic needs. So for me, it comes down to provision of essential supplies. There's another item that I find problematic, and that is esports. And I asked the questions, and thank you for the answer. So if I'm understanding correctly, the implementation of esports is based on empirical data that shows that extracurricular activities in general, and this being one that would be extracurricular, enhance student participation and involvement, and therefore would boost academic achievement. But for me, personally, this is a case where the end does not justify the means. And so, for me, from an operational standpoint, seeing that we are making the effort to balance screen use in our students and children, I don't feel that I can support purchasing all of the recommended software and hardware in the case of esports. And that's from a budgetary, operational standpoint. And thank you for answering all my questions in advance of the meeting.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, the e-sport is an option,
It's an
correct?
extracurricular activity, correct?
Okay. And so, when it comes to screen time, it's not with the curriculum aspect of it, it's about the extracurricular activity. Now, I'm encouraged with something like that type of a program for the simple fact that I know that if you participate in those extracurricular activities like sports and band and those type of things, it helps the overall development of our children, that they become better productive, and in a sense we're looking to get them out of a less impoverished position, and they can excel and become productive citizens. That's what we want, give them the skill sets to get out there. And I know that this e-sport, in my opinion, can help facilitate that, and even more so that when you have this e-sports, that it allows opportunities. It begins to open up doors, opportunities like scholarships and things of this nature, and that helps relieves the pocketbook for many of our kids when they can go on to maybe scholarships into a sports, football, basketball, something of that nature. And so, I think that cost was around $60,000 for the e-sport, if I'm correct.
Yeah, roughly.
And I think that's a pretty good value added for somebody that could potentially be able to get a scholarship that maybe they never had the opportunity to do. I think it does help facilitate that, and that would be my take on that.
One thing I would add about this would be like any other extracurricular activity. So we will have a sponsor who will be supervising while they're, I don't even know how to practice, I don't know. But while they're doing that, they'll be able to see all the screens and everything that's going on in there. So there will be a lot of oversight through that, and it is a MSHA state-sponsored activity. So there's guidelines, and again, I don't know the details. I'm speaking on my wheelhouse. If you're given the chance to do electronic or actually play the sport, I'd be out playing it. But there are guidelines that have to be followed. So
There are people who make careers out of it now.
and there is a lot of scholarship money. So that's really
My nephew is making 6 digits, but
so our
it doesn't come, it's, the data on adults is that it harms these people, just like it harms people who play football and basketball in a different way. So there's risk.
Are we going to cut that funding then too?
No.
I think, like Steve said,
No,
it's
but
it's
this
an
is
extracurricular
children.
activity.
Yes, but we're not purchasing them high-performance computers for curriculum. We're choosing to do it for extracurricular, but they're stuck with Chromebooks in their classrooms that they're already gaming on all the time, getting around Go Guardian. Maybe we can spend the 60 grand getting better Go Guardian or whatever it is to ensure that we are having curriculum during class time. And then I just want to achieve class time. I want to get that component in and focus on that and put the dollars towards that. And then of course I want extracurricular. I want all those things that support our students, but I just feel like we're missing the ball. And that's just my own personal opinion. Like I said, I understand the end. I just don't agree that in this case the means justify that. I understand the component of student involvement. I hear you. I just don't agree with you, Steve.
Yeah, and that's fine. I think
okay.
the concern might be the screen time, maybe?
Yes,
Okay.
because that's all there's this concern, and so it just feels dichotomous. That's all.
John, can I ask, what we're purchasing 60 of them. I assume there's some thought that goes into that. Do you have any idea how it's being implemented? Where
Yep,
they're going?
Bruce can
High
speak
school, middle
to it better than me.
school?
High school only, all 5 high schools.
All 5 of them?
Yep, high school only. I mean, they do have, they do have a middle school level. We're not implementing that, at least at this point. We are seeing more high schools bring this on, especially when you think about the size of our high schools. In our extracurricular teams, there's limited spots available, right? So we're always looking at more ways to get kids involved. And so this is one more activity that kids can get involved in. It also tends to target a group of students who may not be involved in physical sports, so it's one other thing that they can do. But you know, basketball teams have limited spots, right? Soccer teams have limited spots. And when you have a high school of 2,000 kids.
Cheerleading. Cheerleading.
Oh, I forgot cheerleading.
Don't forget cheerleading. Call out basketball and soccer, call out cheerleading.
So, but there's limited spots on the team, and so we're always looking for ways to get kids involved and connect them. But it is high school only.
You said this is part of Mission now.
It is.
This year or next year?
It's already a part of Mission. We just, other school districts have already been participating.
We know, is this, how many other districts in the state are doing this?
We can get that information.
There's several already out there, and so the purchase will be the 5 high schools and Speedy to cover all of our high school students, so they have the access to this.
When they compete, are they doing it, they don't have to travel, I assume. If they're competing, are they doing it online?
Yes. Okay.
So they've identified 3 specific games based upon the MISHA standards that they would utilize. And so the largest game has 5. So the idea of 10 is so they can practice 5 on 5.
Are there any other substantial costs associated with adding this? I mean, we're obviously going to have to pay staff to coach it.
Stipend. Yep. Typical to sponsors. That'll come to you in June, or the salary schedule. Travel's going to be very minimal, if any. Remember, we'll get that information.
Yeah, Mr. Scott can speak to that much better, and then there'll be nominal fees.
I'm sure somewhere it's been, as this has been decided that this is something we want to do and go down the road, then sure somewhere there was a full understanding or budget that was formed rather than just piecing it out. Well, we'll just get the laptops and we'll just.
No, it was so just to go back to take you back to my entry plan that is available online for everyone to see. It's still like a commercial, but that was part of the input when I met with the student leaders from all of the high schools. Also met with Mr. Scott, who is over our athletics and extracurricular programs, and asking what's missing. What do we need to keep students engaged? And at the same time, OTC was going through the same process, and they added also esports last fall. So I think they made their announcement like in November. But that was part of all that data gathering of where do we go next? What do we need to fill in the gap? Another thing that bubbled up was that, and like I said, the reason I'm picking, John knows I'm picking on what cheerleading is, things I heard about how we treat our athletic programs versus our academic scholars bowls and the different types of programming. And so that's why another thing, we're going to pull everything under one person to ensure that there's equity across those different sporting events or extracurricular activities. So this is all a part of the data gathering from last fall and actually ongoing.
When you go to find out, what other schools, I'd like to know what other schools in our area, of our regional are participating. I don't care what Kansas City's doing.
And I think it would be great if Josh Scott could be here to speak to this, and perhaps if it comes up he could, but from what I understand, and I'm hearing this from the university level because I know Drury now has an amazing esports program. I'm hearing about that. So, and giving scholarships to students. So it is one of the fastest growing sports, I understand, in the country. And I know that they have more people that attend the national esports, I guess their competition that's held in Las Vegas, as almost bigger than the NCAA tournaments. But anyway, it is extremely popular and fast growing, and it does also do what we wanted to do with when we brought archery on. And so I was on the board when the first ask came forward of the board to invest, I think, $70,000 into archery. And it was only within 6 months that an ask came back to the board for an additional $70,000 to $100,000 for archery because so many students took part or participated. And I went to one of the first archery tournaments at Parkview, and it was amazing to see the number of students participating that had never participated in any other sport, because they just weren't your typical student that would go out for basketball or football or cheerleading or track. But and I talked to some of the parents that said, this is the first time we've ever participated or attended any kind of school activity because their student is so excited about and interested in archery. So when you get the kids interested in an activity or an event, guess what? Grades go up and attendance goes up and they get involved in their school and discipline issues go down. And that's I don't have the statistics in front of me to back that up, but I heard that over and over and over from teachers and coaches and people in the building. So I see this maybe as another way to get kids involved and engaged at school. That might not.
I would say Mr. Scott did make a full proposal. You do have those numbers. We'll include it in the board update this Friday.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I looked up esports after you asked those questions because I had not heard that term before. There is an article from September 2021 that says 60 high schools in Missouri are members of the Missouri Scholastic Esports Federation. So 60 high schools and 25 Missouri colleges now offer esports at either the club or varsity level.
Mm-hmm.
I like it's gonna go.
I hear that. I don't think that it's a fair comparison to archery, although I understand. Because, but
comparing it, but
yes,
just like engagement.
I know, but to me, esports, it behooves us as board members who went down, when things become trendy and popular and it's the thing to do, is to remember that what drives esports is the multi-billion-dollar industry that feeds off of it, and that ultimately these are children, they're not adults, so I don't really care what OTC or MSU or whatever's doing.
Then we should get rid of basketball and football too, because they're big dollar sports too.
Growing children's minds, and I think that we should it behooves us to look at it from the perspective of, we don't have enough data to know that it's not harmful. And the data that we do have indicates that so far.
For high school, just our high school?
For
just at high school.
Aggression, depression, for just high school, yes.
Yeah.
What it breeds in adults, in young men, young women.
Basketball.
I don't think that there's any data that says that basketball players and football players are more aggressive than the average population.
I can tell you about their head injuries.
But that's different than it breeds behavioral changes.
Head injuries causes behavioral changes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think we're
we're
way off.
Yeah,
here.
we are, but it's okay. We're
It's
having a
okay.
little discussion.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
I do have another question.
Okay,
I do.
Scott.
That's okay.
Yeah, but it's
I just, maybe, I'm looking at CDW Information Technology District, pay $5,000 for carbon black end protection licenses, funded by Information Technology FY22 budget. That's the only thing in Information Technology
there?
where you say that, or it's FY22 budget. It's the very bottom on the first page. The other ones are information. If you're paying out of this year's budget, you don't mention that. Is it FY22 budget or FY23? Just making sure, just clarifying.
The current budget is FY22.
Okay, great. Okay, that's the only question I have.
But what you're pointing out is that Bruce did a really good job of explaining where his purchases were coming from, right?
Bingo. Right.
Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
okay, so let's go back. Any more?
One quick question. Do the purchases of, the same question I had at the very beginning, the purchase of the copiers, does that also have to do with the pulling back from Chromebooks? Or is that happening?
No, that's about every 5 years, 4 to 5 years, we renew our lease.
Okay. Okay, I'll just make a comment myself, which is just I personally will vote yes on this, but I think I've made myself clear, and I think Scott has chipped into that moving forward, I would just really prefer more time. It's best if we can hear these things from you first, in a picture, and then ask those questions. So
Come up
thank
with
you.
a solution.
Thank you.
So I think we've made some good progress in that we now know that a combined meeting is tougher, and so we.
For everyone.
For everyone. And so we need especially this information that's so intense to be good stewards of taxpayers' dollars, that we need this particular information sooner.
It'll be in draft form, and then
Okay.
with understanding that you'll get it, everything that's ready, you'll receive it in advance, and then we will notify you of the additions from when we sent you the draft, the additions.
So it could be a little cumbersome because we'll continue to get additions.
What I'll do is I'll meet with Brandy to look ahead to those combined sessions and target a date that we can have the preliminary draft available. And we'll just add that to our schedule of when board members can expect that.
It sure would make us better prepared, though, because we'll have that extra time. When another added agenda comes onto the agenda, then it's going to be a quick reference, I hope.
Right.
Then we'll be able to solidify this process a lot easier.
Yeah. And so, and I think these are growing pains that comes with, with new board members. So, okay, and then the other thing is, and we've had a chance to kind of talk about some of the other pieces and parts that are also good for us to talk about. So, okay, so I think we're going back to, we have a motion on the table to approve the consent, and we have a second. And so, and we've had great discussion, so are we ready to vote? So, let's vote. Okay, so you get to stay with us now. Moving on to the treasurer's report.
Okay, so in your board packet is the treasurer's report. Again, just has a variety of pieces of information about where we're at financially. We are winding down the fiscal year. As a reminder, for public school districts, fiscal year is July 1 to June 30, which, as we already referenced, creates some uniqueness. But we are winding that down, and things are tracking as anticipated. So you'll notice that our projected ending operating fund balance remained flat from last month. We do anticipate that might climb slightly and closer to where we started the year at 22%. So we'll know more as we draw closer to that. Outside of that, I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Is it possible on the accounts payable check register? It seems like it would be useful if there was a memo line. Because all it shows is vendor and price. Is there not a memo where there's just a certain amount of characters that can put in that says something to the tune of what it's for? I only ask because that's just would be typical of something that I would see as I'm looking at expenditures in my own. I just don't know what to do with this information. You just don't know what most of it is.
Sure. So Ms. Stacy and her team put these reports together, so I'm going to ask her if that is possible.
Yeah. I don't know how big of an ask this is. I don't. It seems like something that would probably already be in the system somehow, and at some point it's going to put it in the line and it's just going to cut off, and we'd at least see something. And I think that would be helpful. Because that would be helpful. That would 90% of this I'd be able to actually look at and say. Thank you.
And I would add to that we want these reports to be helpful to you. If you don't see them as helpful, then give us the feedback on that, and we'll try whatever we need to do to make it more useful.
I have one other more specific question. This came through one of the emails that someone sent, and I think it pertains to the treasurer's report, because somewhere in there, I think it was somewhere in all this, an expense for purchase of Chromebook parts. And then there was a question asked,
Insurance? Was it insurance?
No,
repairs?
repair parts. It was pretty significant.
No, that was from the schedule.
It was fourth quarter, I think it was. Fourth quarter repair parts for Chromebooks, and it was $250,000. It was something, right? And then there was an email question asked by one of the board members that said, and the answer was great, but if I'm understanding this correctly, I don't know if this was for the year or what year, but there was the number $354,750 was spent in parts, and we received $40,788 in fees from the students or parents or for damages.
Reimbursement of one.
Right. So for damage to Chromebooks or whatever, I don't know what period this is. We ate the vast majority of that, $313,962.
Right.
How are those fee schedules determined, and why are we getting fleeced on it so badly? Because it's good for the kids to have accountability if they're going to have these things. And I would expect that number to change with some of the procedures or policies or whatever that we've changed for next year regarding Chromebooks in elementary schools, but we still have them in the older, middle and high schools and everything else. So
Bruce and I connected on this a little bit earlier and kind of talked through it. And Bruce, you can jump in at any time I screw it up. But long story, one thing we have to remember when we're talking about SPS is numbers are going to appear really big for us because we're so much bigger than everybody else, right? So we do experience about $300,000 to $350,000 a year in Chromebook repairs. The bulk of that would be what we would consider normal wear and tear on a device. Some of those repairs are from kids being hard on devices. That is part of it. So we do perform a lot of the warranty work for which we get reimbursed for some of that work. Then we have the fees that the students pay. That does equate to that $40,000 to $50,000 range each year. So that doesn't take care of a lot of the costs. But what we have to recognize is, again, a lot of those repairs are normal wear and tear, glitches that happen, parts that go bad, not necessarily that a student was being hard on it. Now, when you put that into perspective of to be Chromebooks K-12, and I know we're shifting some things, Chromebooks K-12, we're looking at $6 million roughly. Okay, so when you look at $300,000 in repairs, that's about 5% of the cost. But when you look at it through that lens, that probably makes a little bit more sense when you pare it down to a smaller number of devices. So there is a cost to repairing them. It does run in that average pretty steadily. As we send devices home less, we could expect that some of that would decline, but it's something we want to continue to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's not really the net, or I'm sorry, the gross number that I'm talking about, even though I do believe it would be bigger because you're not talking labor here either. We are staffing people to make those repairs. This number that you're showing me is just parts. So the number that we eat we do have a greater expense to repair these things because we've got to staff the people who do it, I assume, unless we're sending it out and paying contract labor for it. It's the net that I'm talking about. Is why is our fee schedule so off? It seems to me like there's the benefit of the fee structure to disincentivize these things from happening. And when I did substituting, I've seen these things. They aren't always treated well. I mean, kids swinging around, pulling keys off of them, grabbing their neighbors or whatever. And I think this is a way that the budget shows us that maybe we're doing something wrong here if we're only getting back 40,000 out of 354. Maybe we need to be a little bit stronger on our policies for if you slam it against the wall, it's not just $50. That thing costs a lot more than that.
Sure. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. I know through the pandemic, I think we were a little bit more lenient on the fees previously than what we had previously. Pre-pandemic,
It was 150, I believe, because I've had to pay one of those before.
Yeah.
Well, you could buy insurance for $5. And I don't really understand the reasoning that if we don't charge them $5, they're more likely to pay the $25. I still don't understand that. I know that was the reason given for dropping the insurance. It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't know. I meant to ask Bruce on that one. Bruce, you have any insight on that?
In terms of moving
The whole insurance thing, yeah, $5 doesn't seem like for what is sophisticated for a child to receive.
So at the time with the insurance program, kind of harkening back to years of old, we used, I want to be careful of, it's not necessarily an insurance program. No, it's actually it was a damage waiver, which meant you enrolled in this program, we would charge you less. Is the way it worked out. And so what we found over time was a lot of students just simply were not going to pay that fee and also not going to pay the fees they incurred. And as part of the free and appropriate public education, we also found some concerns around that piece as well. And so we ended up having a lot of partners that wanted to sponsor kids and do some of these other pieces, taking away funds that could be used for classroom or better supporting the
Say that again, partners that what?
We wanted to fund insurance for
Oh.
Yeah, instead of, putting those funds towards other things. So there were a lot of different factors.
So did that happen? Did that happen? Did somebody previously fund the
We used to have
insurance?
some
So then
partners that would
COVID
want
came,
to fund that.
okay, and then COVID came along and it all went out the door.
It was actually the year of COVID that we had stopped the insurance program.
Okay.
And just tracking the numbers over the year, they were running about neck to neck until COVID hit. And since then, like Dr. Mulford was saying, we kind of suspended fees there for the pandemic piece, and we've been reinstating that and fully expect heading into next year to see an increase on that number as we kind of get back to it.
Get back to what? To
The student fee process, because we didn't start reinstating the fees
so the
until the start of
2550 was not, or the 1025, I don't know what it is. I got to look at it. I have it printed. Huh? So we're going to get back to charging that.
Yeah, and we started that back up this year, but a lot of damages occurred over that summer time frame to start the school year, and that was where we were still coming back from the pandemic, and we reinstated that in October.
And then those numbers reflected repairs. What about loss?
Both.
Oh, so repair includes loss, like chucked it out of the window of the bus, or just that happens, not infrequently. So, or if a child just loses it somehow, that's included in the 350,000.
Well, when we purchase, I'm sorry, to restate that, when we purchase and do that lease, we also include a percentage on top of that to cover the replacement
loss. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And also for loaners and parts, and so that whole number isn't just a straight student for student, there's a few other pieces.
So you anticipate by assessing fees that we're going to close the gap between the cost to the district?
Yeah, previously we've always run about $300,000 and $350,000 in repairs. We used to run more about $80,000 to $95,000 in reimbursement from warranty work and student collection. We would anticipate that starts to come back up next year.
From 40, come back up to 80.
Still a significant gap.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to speak for decisions prior to my time, but typically in school districts, we're not trying to recoup it all. We're really trying to recoup a part of the cost, understanding that there's always going to be normal wear and tear that occurs. And I would even flip it back to textbooks, right? So schools have textbook, kids lose them, they tear them up, all that stuff. You still have to give them another textbook. We can't say, no, you don't get one, you tore it up. We can charge them for it and hope they pay for it. But in the end, they may not, right? And unfortunately, hands are tied a little bit. There are some things we have control over, like not participating in graduation or extracurricular events or things like that if they have outstanding bills. But, I mean, it is a similar situation to textbooks that a lot of us remember.
And that's what I wanted to ask. So a couple questions. If a student straight up loses their Chromebook, how much are they charged?
Depending on if they qualify for a free or reduced lunch versus full, that's where.
And that's the comment I wanted to make, is that it's not the student paying this fine, it's going to be the parent or guardian. And so like a $50 charge for a dual household making $150,000 a year is going to look different than a single parent household making $30,000 a year.
$45 for free and reduced.
Okay, and so that was going to be my question. Are there other non-financial disincentives to destroying a Chromebook? And you said like not participating in graduation, but I assume that also teachers within the classroom, if a student literally picks up a Chromebook and throws it across the classroom, there are other disciplinary measures that can be put into place. Is that an accurate statement?
I would say that's accurate.
Is it $150 for a full replacement? Is that correct?
Not under the current fees schedule.
No, I think he means like what it costs us.
Oh,
What we
our
pay.
last purchase was about 225, if I remember.
25, but the student's 150.
No, 50.
50 for full pay, 25 for free and reduced lunch.
Does that not sound like an opportunity for fraud and abuse?
What do you mean, Kelly?
Like, could you not, if you wanted to, just lose 10 Chromebooks and pay for them for $50 when they
That has happened in the district.
Oh, we don't have any proof of that.
Well, we have.
I didn't make that accusation. I'm just saying, it seems like an opportunity for that. It seems like a little bit of a
It
flaw.
happens.
How do we, I
Out of 25,000 kids,
don't know how we prevent that.
of one incident. I don't think it's a lot.
I don't know. I'm just asking, it seems like,
You better turn them in.
seems like a problem. It seems like it could be a problem.
Our Chromebooks can only be utilized in our login.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay. They can't
have
be,
received them back from.
they can't be jailbroken or something?
I think what happens is, at least the incident that I know of, that after it was the student's 8th or 9th, the teacher said, okay, something's going on. And a conversation was had and it was addressed.
Okay, it's good. Well,
So I think there is a limit where the teacher says, okay, something is going on.
okay.
I mean, and can I ask, in the future, like at some point, I think the gap of 40 will probably go back up to 80 because we're going to reinstate. But I think the way that the district is changing its practices, because let's face it, the wear and tear that little itty bitty kids do on Chromebooks is a lot more than older children. Is it? Is it?
Generally see the highest rates of repair at middle school.
Middle school, oh. Oh, well then, that's something for us to look at next year in terms of, I mean, maybe if they didn't go home for the summer, we'd have more of them, or,
Okay.
I don't know. So,
Something to
but
think about.
I'd like to just know with the elementary kids not taking them home, if there's a reduction in repairs. It'd just be something nice to see, like if it makes a dent.
Definitely be monitoring that.
Okay, great. So are we still on the
Treasurer's report.
treasurer's report? Okay, are we still?
I do have one quick question.
Okay.
I'll be easy to answer is, just looking at SR2 financials.
Yes, sir.
And it looks like, that's great, allocation is 27,367, 505, and total spend or in process, 24,789, 887. I mean, that leaves a gap there of 2,577,617. Is that going to be spent, or?
Oh, it'll be spent, yes, sir. That won't be a problem.
We do not leave money on the table.
That'll be a problem.
I would think it'd be allocated to something. But it's something that,
Like the 2 million in tutoring, you mean? What do you?
I mean, there's
Or
a
you look at the
difference
bottom
between
line?
the allocation and the total spend or in process. You would think there'd be something else in process for the people.
So again, the budget we started with was a projected,
Right.
and we may not spend all that, but if we do not, then we will reallocate those funds either within the current year to cover other allowable expenses,
Okay.
or to next year's budget.
I think the way that's presented is very helpful because as things come to us, then we, okay, now where that money is, and then we have that, you always add that piece so we can go back to, yeah, that's the ESSER dollars, because there's often things that come up about new staffing, new positions, or we can always go back to that, oh, that's one of the ESSER funded positions. So, I mean, I found that helpful.
Okay.
So, but that's a great question.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. I doubt anything will be left. So, okay.
Because we have time to spend
Anything.
it still, right?
Yes.
We have still.
We still have another year.
Yeah.
Okay, any other treasurer's report? Okay, at this time, can I get a motion to, we do need to approve the treasurer's report.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second it.
Okay, Sharita made the motion and Mary.
Oh.
Second?
You got you quick.
We jumped on that, ready to go. Thank you, John, for all your, and Kara for your work on that. Oh, I forgot to vote. So that moves us on to 7.01, no information items. Am I right? Oh, sorry. Oh, didn't check for vote.
Yep, I am.
He is.
Came up,
Okay. Steve, yours?
voted.
Okay, good. Okay, we've got There they are. Okay, great. Okay, moving on to 7.0, no information reports this evening. And moving on to 8.0, no policies for review. Whew, that's good. That would have been tough to do all those in a short time. 9.01, proposed rates and fees for 2022, 2023. That was a lot of reading. So are you there to answer any questions?
So Ms. Stacy will be up here with me for these next two, but you'll notice on the proposed fee schedule, there's not a whole lot of change. We're proposing most of those fees stay flat. We did just have a little conversation around some of those. You'll notice advanced placement tests that go up slightly. That's not something that we control. And then also free and reduced lunch prices could go up slightly. Want to emphasize that there is a calculation that we follow per DESI that kind of guides what that rate has to be, and it kind of follows the full pay reimbursement rate. So districts have to try to be as close as they can be with that full pay, and if you're not, you have to move so much on your pricing when you calculate it. And then you'll notice our tuition rate did go up for each category. We don't have a lot of students that pay tuition to come here, but we do have some that want to do like the IB program and things, don't live in the district, so they have to pay tuition to attend. So that's pretty much the summary of the increases. There was a tournament rate for softball that was added, and everything else stayed flat. So if you have questions, we'll be happy to take those questions.
Thank you for answering all the questions and things. They're very helpful.
You're welcome.
Why are we seeing things flat from last year to this year when everything else in the world seems to be increasing?
Yep. So, it's one of the things I would say around fees is that we certainly want to make them affordable. A lot of it is activity type fees. And so as long as we can ensure that our cost is generally covered, we try to keep them as stable as they can be. So I don't have an exact answer for you how we can keep everything flat, other than what we did is we send this out to the people that are over it, had them review it to confirm it is still sufficient enough to cover whatever the expense is, and then they report back to us on that. The things that you are seeing go up is that would reflect that cost, tuition, food, meals, so some of those things are going up with that. And most of these things you're talking about, like passes to get into a game, parking decals, things like that. Activity cards. A lot of it's just access to events.
I have to bring up esports again. Is there going to be a fee for esports?
Is it on there?
Will there be a fee for esports?
I think there is a fee to participate in activities.
But not to watch, if you wanted to watch the esport tournament.
I just got it.
I don't know if we'll be charging for that or not. I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't know that that's necessarily an
Maybe you can watch online.
Right. Let us know.
I just didn't see one in here, so I just probably...
We'll research that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
If they're watching on a large screen in the gymnasium, they pay the entrance fee to the gymnasium like they would on any other sport, right? Gymnasium fee?
That's a good point. You're right. Like going into a basketball game or football game.
In a business sense, if you think about it, the more that you do increase those, the less participation that you have. And in return, you don't meet the schedule that you would need in order to maintain your facilities and that. So I can see trying to make that balance, and that gets difficult.
And most of these are student fees. So, obviously trying to keep that the best way.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Okay, so this is proposed rates and fees for 2022-23. So do we have a motion that the board approve fees and tuition rates for the 2022-23 school year as presented?
I make the motion.
Thank you. Steve makes the motion and Scott second. So we'll vote. Okay,
So we are doing the operating fund, general special revenue presentation tonight. Stacy will, like previously, will do most of the talking. I'll chime in here and there. But I would like to just kind of remind the board that when we talk about fund balance, it's a percentage of the operating fund, which is general and special revenue and teachers fund. So this is where most of our salaries and all of our salaries come out of, and most of our supplies and just kind of the day-to-day expenses. So we're going to kind of talk through that. This is, again, current year budget and setting the stage for what we're going to be bringing to you at our small group meetings at the end of May, and then as a budget proposal next month.
All right.
We'll grab a couple more.
And we're done. All right, so tonight we are going to be talking about the general and special revenue fund, which is also called the teachers fund. So this chart is kind of familiar. We've had it in every presentation so far this year, and it just breaks out the 7 different funds that the district is managing. And so when you combine the teacher and general fund, those are called the operating funds. So as we journey through this presentation tonight, you'll see it referred to as operating funds. So the source of funds, or the revenue for the operating fund, is the fund balance carryover from the prior year, local, county, state, federal revenues, and interest income. So those are some primary source of funds that make up the revenue. The chart represents the current year revised budget for revenue broken down by revenue type. So you can see that the district is very heavily locally funded with local revenues. So that would be our current like property tax revenues that we receive in. Proposition C, sales tax revenues, would fall into that local category as well. And then the state revenues is our foundation formula, basic formula, classroom trust fund revenues. And then the federal revenue would be our title, special ed. Also within this would be ESSER, but I have pulled out the ESSER amount just to represent a more normal picture for you without those funds in the pie chart.
I want to remind everybody on the fund balance carryover. That's essentially the amount of extra in the bank we need to keep so that we can ensure we can pay the bills and make payroll year round. Because the further you go in the calendar year, typically the lower your fund balance goes because of that big amount of local revenue we get in December and January. Right, so we get a big payment right at the start of the calendar year, and then it kind of dwindles down as we spend it, right? So you have to have a little excess there so we don't have to end up borrowing money to make payment.
Yeah, so districts that are typically more heavily locally funded will carry kind of a higher fund balance to get through from, January to January.
Can you say what federal was? It was title?
Title, special services, food service.
Is the fund balance carryover that like 19
Yeah, that's what
That's the percentage.
And that's not represented in that pie for this year.
No, these are just the revenues, like the revised budget revenues. So that fund balance percentage is a calculation from the revenues and the expenditures and the fund balance carryover. Any other questions on revenue outside of that?
I think you're referring to our meeting that we had, is that right? Where we had to maintain.
Our income.
What was it, more than 13% or something like that before we
Strive
start?
15.
Just right at 15, and we're at almost 19 something, I think.
And SPS traditionally has tried to stay in the 17 to 18% range.
And so those revenues are used to support salaries, benefits, purchase services, and supplies. So when you look at this pie chart, which is the revised budget for the current year expenditures, the salary and benefits combined total 80% of our operating expenditure budget. So we are very people-focused and salary and benefit driven. The rest of the budget is spent on supplies, which represent 12%, and purchase services, which represents 8%. And we will dive into each one of these categories as we go through the presentation.
Before you go on, so I've been able to learn from a lot of very intelligent financial people. Fair being one of them. But when you talk about salary and benefits, 75 to 80% is where you need to be sustainable. If your salary and benefits start climbing above 80% of your operating, then you're headed towards a path of maybe having to cut positions and drift people. So that's the percentage we really want to keep an eye on. So we're kind of at the top end of that right now. And so that's just something to be aware of.
All right, so our salaries in the operating fund. So 75% of our staff are coded to the teacher's fund. The other 25% are coded to the general fund. So in order to be in the teacher's fund, the position that you hold has to be an instructional related position, and you have to have a DESE teaching certificate or a DESE issued certificate. If you don't meet those criteria, so you're not in an instructional position, then you go into the general fund.
So if you have a DESE certificate, but you're not in an instructional position, like a principal, it comes out of a general fund.
So a principal would have a DESE certificate, an administrator, so they would be in the teacher's fund.
So it's not an and, it's an or.
So the first qualifier is an instructional position. If that is a yes, then you have to have a DESE
Because it's not
certificate.
if they have it, it's if they're required to have it for their.
That position's required to have it.
Principals are if the position.
So I could have a DESE certificate and be a custodian.
Okay.
I would be charged to the general fund because my position is not instructional related. So that's the first qualifier. If it's instructional related, then do you have the certificate? If it's not instructional related, it defaults to general fund. There's a whole flow chart I'd be happy.
Principal is instructional related.
Correct.
Oh, a principal is instructional related? So is a paraprofessional instructional related?
Yes.
But they're not certificate. They don't have a certificate.
They hold a DESE certificate, they could be in the teacher's fund.
Oh, but the position is instruction related.
We require all of our paraprofessionals to have a sub-certificate, right, from DESE.
So sub-certificates account?
Okay. So they would be in Fund 20 or the
Well,
teacher's
because
fund.
So paras
subs
come
aren't
out of
paid.
teacher fund.
You said that.
Sorry, say that again.
You asked if sub-certificates count, but they're contracted services. They're not in the teacher's fund, correct?
Sorry.
Well, we do have some in-house sub.
Substitute.
And for some of our positions, like paras, we require them
Have
to have
sub-certificate.
a sub-certificate.
Oh, I guess I don't know what a sub-certificate is. Like a substitute certificate?
Correct.
Oh, I thought a sub-certificate meant something below a certificate, like a submarine?
Yeah, at first I thought that.
But in order to claim state aid, the person has to have a teaching certificate. So if an aide is ever working with students in small groups without the supervision of a teacher, the only way we can claim state aid is if they have a substitute. So we require all of them to have substitute.
Oh, good. All right, so diving a little bit further into salaries. So this chart represents salaries by functional area. So if you just think with me for a second, functional area is just kind of a big, broad bucket of funding, right? So we have kind of three broad functional areas. We have instructional, and then support services, and then community services. So those are broken down here for you. These are how our salaries are kind of divvied out among those functional areas, and I've included some examples of what would fall into the instructional, the support services, and the community services areas. Obviously, no surprise, the instructional category does make up the largest percent, followed by that support area.
So it says support, but they get paid out of the teacher's fund if they're instructional related. So these two pie charts are related, but they're not related.
They're related in a way, if you think of it as like a chart, right, that if it's a yes and no question, it's got general and teachers kind of at the top, and then you start going down into these functional categories. So I'm a teacher, or let's go with a counselor. I'm a counselor, so I'm Fund 20. I'm a teacher's fund, paid out of there, but I'm not directly tied to the instructional day.
Got it.
So now I'm supporting instruction, so I'm support service.
So it's two different ways of looking at the same
Breaking
pie.
it down a little bit
One's
further.
by what you do, one's by how you get, what fund your payment is from.
If you remember, our GL codes are like 19-digit codes. First two digits tell you the fund, which we were on the last slide. Then it goes to function and then object.
So as we journey through the presentation tonight, we kind of started with those two big funds. We'll look at functional areas, and then I'll even pull in some object areas for you as well to kind of go through that. All right, so this is benefit by object type. So object type is one further down from functional area, right? So you would have like a teacher in the classroom, and then these are the object types that would support that teacher's benefits. So that teacher would potentially have, well, they would have certified retirement. They would pay into that fund, and then the employer would as well. Medical and dental insurance, workers' comp. Teachers do not pay FICA, but they do pay Medicare, and so those are just some of those object types for the benefit line. This is revised budget. So the two biggest items on here are obviously the retirement, so the contributions to the retirement, and medical and dental insurance, and we'll go into those a little bit deeper on the next slide. So medical.
If you're a certified position, you get certified retirement. If you're a classified position, you get classified retirement.
Got it. We'll go a little bit. We'll go a little bit further. Yeah. So good lead in. Medical and dental insurance. So currently, as of the latest census, we have 3,376 benefited employees. So 95% of our employees are benefited. There are 5% of employees who are either ineligible, maybe they don't work a certain number of hours and meet criteria, or they've completely decided to waive coverage at the district level. So our FY22, our current year, estimated employer-paid medical and dental benefit is $21.5 million. So that money is the employer-paid portion that is then going into the health benefit trust fund account. The other portion of the health benefit trust fund account is from the employee-paid portion.
Now, to put that in perspective, because we always talk about SPS being large numbers. That $21.5 million that you pay for employee insurance is over half of my entire budget in my last district for everything. Okay, so again, I think when we do look at numbers, we have to look through that lens of things are just going to be magnified.
We're the largest district in the state.
It's hard for me to talk in millions. Sometimes I slip and talk in thousands because my brain can't even comprehend the millions sometimes. The retirement contributions. So contribution rates have remained unchanged since 2011-2012. So the first rate we have listed there is PSRS, which stands for Public School Retirement, Public School Retirement System. So the contribution rate is 14.5%. That is employee and employer.
So make sure that's clear. The employee has 14.5% taken out of their gross to go in. Then we have to match that with another 14.5% paid by the district for a total of 29%.
And we have a small section of employees who pay into PSRSS, is what it's called. So it's when you hold a valid DESE certificate, but you're in a non-instructional position. So in that instance, they don't pay the full 14.5, they pay a 2/3 rate of 9.67, but then they also contribute to Social Security. That's been in place since 2010.
Kara, I think Steve had a question.
Just a quick question on that 5% of ineligibility. What is the criteria? What's the threshold? Is it like so many hours or
Yeah,
what?
so generally employees in regular positions and who regularly work 20 hours or more per week qualify for that.
It's 20.
The final contribution rate is for peers, and that is public education employee retirement system, 6.86%. And so that would be someone like me who does not hold a DESE certificate and I'm not in an instructional position.
So is that the difference?
And I pay Social Security too.
Is that the certified versus classified? So certified people go to PSRS and classified?
If you hold it
years.
And a person who's
Write it on the slide.
a person who's certified but working in a classified go to PSRSS.
Oh, okay.
Like a speech therapist.
They have it, but their position is not.
What's the reason for it being less if you're not certified?
They pay Social
You pay Social Security, full Social Security. And then PSRS, not pay any Social Security.
And we don't pay them for teachers, for example, for certified.
Because they have that retirement fund.
Teachers are ineligible to draw Social Security.
And so they don't pay into it and they don't draw from it.
Right.
There are a couple of weird
Keep learning.
I know. Do people, so if a teacher, let's say you were a teacher and now you're doing this.
Yeah.
So do you pay into PSRS and then you flip to, that's why they can't flip to peers because they're certificated. They switch to PSRS. Got it. So they stay. That's why, because these certificated people can go in and out. I got it.
are a lot of fun rules around the retirement system.
That makes sense now why they added it, because these people can.
And just so you know, all of the retirement system stuff is state statute and mandates. So we
Can't change it.
So if you have somebody who's not certificated, like a para who goes to school that comes back, then they move up from peers to PSRS.
If they're vested in peers, they can keep that.
Oh.
It'd be 5 years to be vested. If you're not vested, you can roll it over to PSRS or withdraw.
If you're vested, it means down the road you get money back, but it's a small amount because you vested only like 5 or 10 years or whatever. Got it.
That's options.
You don't have an option to opt out.
Correct.
So it's, do you ever hear anyone say, I'd love to opt out? All right, so collective bargaining. So the school district has 6 bargaining units. The Springfield National Education Association, or SNEA, represent 5 separate units: the teacher, librarian, counselor, school nurse, support personnel, clerical, and school police. And then Teamsters Local Union, number 245, includes bus drivers and bus aides. The negotiations happen from February 1st to June 1st, and recommendations will be presented to the board in June.
And I would add that we have a couple of other groups that are in the process of forming as bargaining units. So that'll be coming to the board here relatively soon, maybe even.
All right, so we've talked about salaries, we've talked about benefits, now we're going to dive into purchase services. So this again is that big picture by functional area, instructional support and community. So the purchase service line represents 8% of the total operating budget. So within these functional areas, these high overarching areas, you've got your substitute services, extracurricular travel, you've got legal and election services, professional development. In the community area, we have volunteer background checks, and then the contracted before and after school care. So a variety of contracts that we pay for services, our substitute legal fees, our audit work also would fall into this area. So anytime we're paying for any kind of service, it would fall into this category.
Why is substitute services in 2 different slices of the pie?
So you could have a sub for a teacher, instructional, and you could have a substitute for a counselor. Maybe not a great example, but something like that.
The
right?
secretary.
So, yeah, custodian. So those would be support services. So like PenMax substitutes would fall into both of these categories. We would have functions with those kind of expenditures, both of those functional areas. So breaking that down even further, so we talked about the overarching functional areas, and now we're going to dive into the functional categories. So this is just a breakdown by functional category, just pulling out some kind of high-fly, high-dollar amounts. You can see that nutrition services, instructional, custodial and grounds, building maintenance, transportation, technology, and then some other support services. So that would be counseling services, your curriculum services, business services, human resource services, those kind of things. And then one step further, so we've talked about fund, we've talked about function, and now here are the purchase services broken down by object type for you. You can see that substitute service line, there's property insurance in there, training and extracurricular activities and supervision for travel, repairs and maintenance. I just wanted to give you guys some more detail behind those budget numbers.
If you were going to marry the object type to the, trying to understand how these relate to the functional category, let's say insurance. You have property insurance, and then, but the pie shows different categories. So, but insurance, just using it as an example, can go across. So transportation, insuring our buses, building maintenance, insuring our buildings. Does it, so it goes.
So there's typically one functional area for like insurance or property and liability insurance, something like that. But like an example that I could give.
So that's under other support services then? I'm trying to understand the way you.
Management.
I guess I'm trying to figure out how this pie, how the object relates to the function, how they.
Yeah. So let's go with instruction, right? So you've got instruction as a functional area, and within that you would have sub-services. Or you would have facilities, and within that you could have repairs and maintenance.
You'd have
A lot of
objects within each function?
So your function kind of tells you the type or well, really the area, right? The area, and your object tells you kind of the what. So you've got facilities and maintenance, and they're buying repairs, or you have nutrition services, and they're buying food. That's in supplies, but it kind of tells you.
But not every function is going to have all these objects. They kind of
Not
sort
all of
out
them.
differently.
Right. Yep.
And DESI has a code book we have to follow.
So it's just two different ways of looking at
It's
it.
just slicing and dicing
They
this
don't
data to try to give you.
necessarily go under each other. They don't. It's not like this then divides into this. It's just two different ways.
So the funds a big bucket, the object's a smaller bucket. The next is the building, it's even smaller. So as you go down the GL code, it gets narrower on house feet.
How does repairs and maintenance seem so low? Is that
And so this would just be like services for repairs and maintenance. So if
just
we're-
what we contract out?
Right, so then that, what we don't do in-house, right? So you have to have someone clean something, or you have to have someone repair an engine or something like that, it would be
And our capital
repairs and all that.
Right.
So like repairs and maintenance is 3.89%, but then building maintenance is 14%. So there's other objects within that. But repairs and maintenance would not be in technology, or it would be, because we do have that.
Would be.
So that line item on repairs and maintenance is 3.89%. Some of it is in technology, some of it is in building maintenance, some of it could be in transportation, repairing. So it does, they intersect. Okay.
Yep, so if you think of the GL code, kind of like Dr. Jungman was saying, I have too many Johns in my life, I'm so sorry. Dr. Mulford was saying.
He's going to be flattered.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. So, yeah, okay. Moving forward.
It's okay.
The GL code, right? So you start with the funds, and then you move to the function. And the coach crap from these guys back here. There will be a text when I get back. You start with the fund, the function, the object, the location, the program. So as you go down that GL string, you get more detailed, it gets more granular, right? So they do intersect, and they do kind of tie to each other. Yeah.
Chart of accounts.
So more to come, because we'll be getting more detail on this.
Is what we call it.
Chart of accounts, general ledger accounts. All right, so we're going to do the same thing for supplies. So we've got, again, those high arching functional areas, so for support, instruction, and community services. This represents 12% of the operating budget. So salary and benefits has that 80, and then purchase services supply make up the rest. I've got some examples there for you of what kind of supply types can fall within these categories. So instructional, you've got just your instructional materials, consumables, software. Support services, food, utilities, fuel, transportation, technology, library books. And then community services, we have early childhood supplies, and then food for our early childhood program. Breaking that down even further by functional category, again, you see the same categories represented, with instructional making up the largest chunk of that pie, followed by building maintenance and then nutrition services. And breaking it down even further by object type. So the majority is just general supplies, your just run-of-the-mill everyday supplies needed for operations. We've got supplies for technology related broken out, food supplies, utilities, fuel, textbooks, and then other supplies and materials. And like Dr. Mulford mentioned, these are driven by the DESI accounting manual. Those object codes are given to us by DESI. So we report back at the end of the year by these object and functional areas.
Food supplies or nutritional services across the district?
Yes.
So, but that's offset by fee structure and by,
Revenue. Mm-hmm.
so if it's, if meals are paid for by the state or federal government, we pay for that and get a reimbursement?
That's right. So we have free lunches, so we get a full reimbursement for those things. Reduced, we get all of like 30 cents reimbursed, and then you have full pay. And believe it or not, on full pay, we still get a small reimbursement amount, like 30 cents or something, Travis. Not much. We get a small amount.
Is that coming from state?
That's federal. Yeah. And then the amount we charge students and faculty make up the difference. Typically, food service programs lose money. But the last couple of years, we've been black because of all the free meals for everybody. So we've got full reimbursement for next year. We'll revert back to traditional. But SPS has, I think, been relatively close on cost versus revenue.
So for the free and reduced, does the federal government set the price for which they will reimburse? And then we decide if we could go over that if we decided to. We can only just get a reimbursement for this much.
That's correct. So the reimbursement is set.
Yeah.
As far as what we charge full day, we can set whatever we want to.
But when we're setting our budget for whatever a meal costs, we're probably trying to align that with what the federal reimbursement is.
Pretty much. It's sometimes a little bit more.
And are there other requirements? You don't have to list them, but are there other requirements of the federal government outside of just price? For us to reimburse you, it has to be this, this, and this?
Your meal has to meet certain guidelines.
There's nutritional guidelines for it to meet?
That's right.
Okay.
Certain things have to be served. In portion sizes, portion size requirements.
Is there a easily consumable list of those?
Let's see if we can come up with our.
that could be sent. I'm not asking for you to deep dive. I'm just saying, is there a hey, these are the simple things?
You might be able to include a link or something.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll find something.
I think it's on the USDA's website. It is.
Okay, thank you.
Here, I know you're towards the end, but before you finish, that way all our questions are answered as we go through. So I noticed that in the supplies or in the services, that there's the instructional service, which is the exact same amount that's under functional area and functional category. So do you just repeat that code when you write your thing out?
Yeah, so I did not break down that instructional area further. So within that instructional area for the functional categories, you would have like elementary instruction.
Oh, so there are? Oh, okay. So it's not like you repeat the code. You just left it, okay, got it.
I just left it as one kind of grouping as instructional.
But there are
There's
categories
a lot that falls
within it.
into that, right?
So it's not a repeated.
We'll see more of that as we journey through into the budget, presentation and recommendation.
Thank you.
All right, so our final slide for this evening is just kind of going over the reporting that we do on the operating fund and just that financial transparency. Every month we bring to you the treasury reports and those items you reviewed tonight and had discussion on. And then we, again, contracts, agreements, change orders, bid, had a lot of discussion on that tonight as well. The budget development process is another way that we try to report out and be transparent about what's going on through the presentations and the small group meetings and then the budget document. We have our external financial audit firm, which is Westbrook & Company currently, and our internal audit firm, which is BKD. And then we do a variety of state reporting through the annual Secretary of the Board report, or the ASBR, as you'll hear it referred to. And then some final expenditure reports at the end of the year for various programs. So if we're doing final expenditure reports on ESSER, they'll do final expenditure reports on title, those kind of things. And then I think almost monthly, or at least I know at the June meeting, but I think it's almost monthly at this point, the employee compensation plan, or the salary schedule comes before the board as well. So just wanted to kind of summarize the things that we're doing internally to help report on these funds and just kind of be transparent about the process. And again, we want these items to be helpful, so if there's anything, any suggestions, we're willing to take that feedback. All right, so we're wrapping up the budget presentation schedule. We've got some small group meetings happening at the end of May. We'll bring the budget presentation forward on June 7th, and then we'll seek recommendation for approval on June 21st. I'm in fast and furious. It's exciting. Can I answer any other questions that you have?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's we got a lot of details tonight, but more to come, so. Okay, so that was information items, so no action tonight, and that will move us to 11.01 change orders and agreements. Dr. Shaw.
Good evening.
I sensed great disappointment at our last meeting that I didn't have a list for you, so I wanted to
You made up for it tonight.
make sure there wasn't disappointment 2 meetings in a row. So as you look at the list, you'll see that the majority of everything on this list represents items that are considered agreements. Those are items that are currently in our FF&E, which is a furniture, fixture, and equipment budget. So these are not additions to our budget, these are part of the budget. And then you'll also notice that the change orders represent a total of $25,000 in actual deducts to those projects. And so no additions tonight to our existing budgets, only agreements. The majority of the agreements that fall under our FF&E budgets are technology related, whether it's technology within the classroom for clear touch panels, whether they are projectors, whether they are security cameras and phone systems within our new construction buildings, some digital signage, network equipment. All of those things fit within our already budgeted FF&E items. And so I'll be happy to answer any questions if you need clarification on any specific items, but the total that I'm presenting to you this evening represents $538,074.48. That again represents a change order and agreement for our 2019 bond projects.
Why would something like $140,000 for clear touch panels at Jarrett be a change order? Why is that not something that was produced?
It's not a change order, it's an agreement. So if you look on the left column,
oh, I see that. Gotcha.
You'll see that it's agreement. Yes, that's already budgeted for.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you tell me why one of the change orders is negative? That change order at Jarrett for $5,581, removal of lights on the sound panel.
So there were sound acoustical panels that go on the stage. And one of the things that were put into scope of that by the vendor were lights on those sound panels. The lights didn't serve any purpose other than giving light for the stage, which there's already in the ceiling of the stage. It didn't have anything to do, there is a light bar that is for productions. We said there's no reason to have that in there, let's pull that out of scope. But that's
I'm sure this is just terms of art in your industry. What's the difference between a deduct and a change order that's negative?
Well, a deduct means there's no difference. A negative change order is considered a deduct.
Okay.
A positive change order is in addition to the cost.
Thank you.
So maybe I didn't quite understand. So I know what a change order is, but these agreements are something that was what? Just something that we never agreed. It's not a change to it, but it's something we decided now we just needed.
It was budgeted for in the overall furniture, fixture, and equipment budget. But you as the board, just like the KCOP section, need to approve all expenditures. Correct. Right. Essentially, there's an agreement between vendor and SPS that they're going to provide this particular.
So the agreements are not changes to what's budgeted. They're just agreement contract.
They're part of the budget. Right. A change order changes the overall total of the project budget, whether that be to our good or to the contractor good, if you will.
Thank you.
And I wish we'd never see change orders, but change orders are a part of construction.
And I will say, looking at these change orders through here, they're pretty minimal.
Very minimal.
So, good job on that.
Garrett has been a very challenging project because it's so large. But at current state, we've only seen about 1% in change orders on a $32 million project.
Wow.
So that's kudos to the architects, kudos to those that have bid the project, kudos to our project managers who handle the day-to-day operation of the projects and vetting all of those things. So,
I noticed when I drove by Jarrett the other day, on the west side of the property, there's a huge cantilever. Do you have any idea what's the reason for that?
So that'll be the student pickup and drop-off area. So when you have a capacity of 725 students, a lot of them will come out those doors. That'll be an area that they can get out of the building, stay underneath.
Does that require due to constraints in the size of the property? Because I know there's a really expensive engineer.
There were a lot of constraints in regards to the car queuing, yes.
city requires us to have enough car queuing on property for 1 car for every 10 student capacity. So we have to be able to put 73 cars on that property, excluding the parking lot, in order to keep them off the street. So by doing that, that's going to allow our students to dismiss and arrive in a much more expedited manner.
The need, that cantilever became part of the design because it was a covered drop-off area.
Correct.
Even though there's, what, 3 stories of, or 2 stories of construction above it? Okay.
I think some of us are wondering what the word cantilever means.
Canopy?
A
giant canopy. I think that's what he's referencing.
Well, picture the building, if you look at it from the street on the east side.
There's a good picture in the
Bond update, okay.
It sticks out over, like, basically what you would think of as foundation. There's not supports underneath it. I mean, it's floating. It's just out there floating, which requires a lot of engineering. Because if you look at it, it defies the laws of physics, right? So it requires a lot of engineering because it's holding a lot of weight above it, just floating.
So that's just to have a covered area for drop-off?
Well, I mean, that provided that purpose, but it was also part of the design that the architects put in place, yeah. It's dual purpose. It wasn't just specifically for that. It was an opportunity for them to be able to design it that way. And we remind you that the cost of the construction for Jarrett came in about $1 million under what we project to be. There's almost $3 million in that project that probably not be spent. So it's coming well under what we expected.
Great.
Great.
Okay, good questions. Anything else?
Have a video for us today?
I
No?
think we have to vote on this first.
You got to vote on this first, Rita, and then we'll get to the...
You know I like your videos.
We all love the videos on the quarterly bond
They're pretty
updates.
cool.
So, okay, so at this time, this is an action item. So at this time, we need a motion that the board approve the change orders and agreements as presented.
I make that motion.
Second.
Okay, so Steve made the motion and Sharita second. And so at this time, we will vote. Okay, motion carries. So now we're going to move to 11.02. I think I should let Sharita present this.
So it's time for the quarterly update. Last one, I believe, was in February. And so you'll see many slides that are similar, but gives us the progress moving forward. We do add a couple slides, or 1 or 2 slides for the DAR Ag Academy, even though it wasn't a bond project. But we wanted the board to be able to see that information as well. But currently, projects under construction are Hillcrest, Jarrett, York, and we have Twain and Field storm shelter gymnasiums. This is the draft sequencing plan that we put together way back in 2018. A lot of colors, a lot of lines, but basically what this represents is the plan of attack as we began working through this and once the bond was approved in 2019. The yellow represents when projects were to be designed and bid. The green represents actual construction. And you can see as we work through this, there's also blue where we relocate some students, primarily those students that were going to attend the former Sherwood site because their elementary was being renovated. Currently, York Elementary students are housed in that building. And then you'll see the red oval, and that just gives you an idea of where we are. So you can see where we've come and where we are, and the goal and the schedules currently still put us hopefully finishing by the end of December of this school of 22 as we anticipated and planned all along. This gives you an idea of where in Springfield our major 10 projects have taken place. This does not represent the 33 secure entrances that we did. Those happened all over the community at every school where we didn't have those. But you can see the majority again are north of Sunshine. You can see by the numbers which ones have been completed and then the anticipated dates for the remaining 5. This is a snippet that I pulled directly numbers from the monthly bond financial report. This section on the left represents the fund sources. Again, we have our bond, we have the premiums that were earned on the bond when sold, the interest we've earned. The $10 million investment represents the $10 million that we've taken out of capital and put into the bond funds. We did have a $540,000 contribution from Boys and Girls Club for their portion of Williams. And then there was an insurance claim on Fulbright Early Childhood Center when we were in construction there that represents income. Obviously, we had that paid out, totaling $196.61 million. The middle represents the total project estimate as we started. And then you will see the total adjusted project budget where things currently stand. So you can see that we are looking at being approximately have $4 million to the good. Again, that would be $4 million of that 10 that was put in from the district capital. We would utilize all of the bond funds, but potentially would have $4 million remaining from that 10 to utilize for future projects. Again, another thing I want to point out is as you look at these numbers over here, the only projects that are not within what we estimated them to be are Twain and Field storm shelters. Those hit at a time when pricing began to really escalate. They came in over what we expected. We did, when you look at Mann and Wilder storm shelters, you'll see that there's only been $585,000 spent. That was for the design and bidding of those two storm shelters. So we designed 4, put 4 out to bid. Those came in even much higher than Field and Twain, and so we were only able to afford to do Field and Twain. Therefore, we have Mann and Wilder designed and ready to go for a future bond issue. But proud of the work that our team has been able to do in very, very challenging construction times to be able to continue to keep these projects within the cost that we've estimated them to be.
Jarrett shows a number. It's not done. So is that an estimated total adjusted project budget?
That is an estimated total, and that includes a contingency line item that I have put into that estimation. So that still includes another 2% of contingency. Should we not use that 2% contingency, it would be less than that amount.
Are there more? Is that the only one that's active? I guess not.
Garrett's active. Hillcrest is active. It's very close.
The white ones.
That one, very hopeful it will stay within budget. York, and keep in mind, York was an added project. York was added. It was not part of the 2019 bond issue. It was added because of this excessive funds that we were able to utilize. And so it has stayed within what we estimated originally that project would be. So Hillcrest High School, this is again the rendering that we continue to see. It's beginning to look a lot like that rendering, and you'll be able to see that with the drone footage. But these two pictures are of the performing arts section that's being added. Much of this space was utilized up at the annex school, and one of the goals was to get all of our students at Hillcrest under one roof and not have to leave the building for classes. You can see the main academic wing that's being constructed. The bottom left is looking at that from the northeast corner, and then this is a picture of the hallway. If you were ever in the main academic wing of the previous Hillcrest, it was about half that size, and just a much better setup. All of the classrooms are now being built to the size that are needed for our students. And this is just some pictures on the inside. One of the great things that I love about these updates that I get to provide is just the change over 3 months. And to see the pictures that I showed before and to see the video, it really is changing. And the construction crews are really doing a great job to finish this up. Images of what Jarrett will look like. This is the example here. This is the corner that Kelly was referencing earlier. You can't really see it go back, but this is the northwest corner of the school. The main entrance is over here in the side. This represents our what is our cafetorium, if you will. These will be stairs that will be utilized for performances. It'll be utilized for additional learning spaces. And the floor down here represents where the cafeteria will be. The gymnasium is back here, which will be, there will be a closed wall. You won't be able to see inside the gym from there, but it will be a great space to be able to have not only activities going on in the gym, but also in this space down here. You can see just the size and scope of what that stage looks like. I was able to take some Springfield contractors on a tour last week, and just to see that space in person, and it's going to be fantastic for our students. This is one of our either the music or orchestra room. What I wanted to point out on this is you can see the different blocks on the wall. There was a lot of design that went into the acoustics of these spaces, and so those were purposely for sound. The walls, which you can't tell here, are actually have a slight angle to them because of all of the sound that was purposely done in that way. So much different design than what you would do in elementary, if you will. This is one of our science classrooms. These things, plumbing, rough ends coming up out of the floor. There will be lab table / desk that will seat 4 students will be at each of those areas. But a lot of the feedback that we received from the science teachers is that they wanted the labs within their classrooms and not have a separate lab that they had to share with somebody else. And so they each have this. They have shared storage in between the rooms, and it was designed specifically for the needs of our middle school students. And then this is just an area that represents coming down from the second floor. Library sits in the front northeast corner of the building. And then across the hall from that is the art classroom. York Elementary. Again, this is our main entrance down here. It will be a single story on this side, 2-story on the east. This represents a view from the northeast as well. Storm shelter gymnasium here. This is the cafeteria next to it. And then you see stairs that go up. This is on the east side of the building, going into the space. Then an example of, this is the part of the construction that I appreciate the most, because you can truly see all that goes into building a building because of all the mechanical being exposed. And it just really is amazing to me that people can design these, and then people can build it just by looking on paper. Our storm shelters, Mark Twain Elementary, it's about a month ahead of where Field is in construction. Again, these are about 10,000 square feet. They'll sustain up to an F5 tornado. They're ICC 500 rated. They have, this is the connection here from the existing building into the storm shelter. They have stage as well with it's also the music classroom that will be blocked off in the gym. And then it's a full-size gymnasium that students will be able to use for all their PE classes, but also in the event community want to use it for a practice, then they have a full-size gym that they can utilize. Field designed exactly the same way. As you can see, it's about a month behind in its schedule. Both should be finished this summer before school gets started. And this is a connection from the north side of the cafeteria at Field that will come down and then go into the storm shelter. And then finally, just a couple pictures of the Dar Ag Academy, an amazing facility. So much thought went into the curriculum and the needs for these students on how this was designed. Then you can get an idea of what some of the classroom space will look like. So those students 100 students will begin in that facility in the fall. Again, not a bond project, but something we want to provide the board an update on. So with that, we'll show you our most updated video. Yes, ma'am.
Before you show the video, I think it's important for people to remember Hillcrest was supposed to be a phase 1 and phase 2, and phase 2 would have been in a future bond.
That's correct.
York was also a phase 2, and the storm shelter. So once again, I want to commend you and your team for your leadership around the bond, and not only progress is promised, but we actually were able to move other projects up. So I think that's important for the voters to know, and also the board.
It's added about $40+ million worth of projects, which obviously is more added to the plate. But we've got an amazing team. And there are some extremely talented architects, contractors, engineers in this town, in our surrounding towns, that have done a fantastic job and have been great partners through this. And so they deserve a ton of credit in this. It takes a great team to be able to do the work, but thank you for bringing that up. So let me show you this, and then I'll answer any questions you might have.
Travis, I just want to say that I know that I always am one saying something about these videos is because I don't get the opportunity to drive around the city and see all of this progress. And so when you do these quarterly updates with the aerial view, it allows me to see what's going on around the city, and I can see the progress in it. It is exciting to see where we started to where we are now, and it makes me very happy for the kids and the teachers and the community to have these facilities. So thank you.
Kudos to Stephen and his team, because they've got some very talented people that put these together for us and meet the deadlines and know the vision of what we want this to look like. And I used to get really emotional when I watch these, but I don't anymore. I'm becoming a little callous to it, but I shouldn't, because it's great work, and it really is so rewarding for the kids. Any questions that I can answer?
It's just awesome. We're changing the music next year. I feel like I'm walking through the funeral home. We've been talking about this all year, so I just want you all to know that's been an inside joke. It's like, we love the video, Stephen, but can they come up with some different music?
Something more upbeat.
Especially at the end of the meeting, we need something more upbeat. I'm ready.
You're executive funeral home.
See?
We're dying.
I see it completely differently. I think of it
Only eyes would
as
be
deep
open.
and
That's it.
like earth-shattering.
Yeah.
It's absolutely awesome, having been a part of the process from day one with the report, the facilities report that came to the board with all the needs and how each of our buildings were ranked in the categories to where we are now. It's just been amazing, and I really think back, it started in 2015, and I mean, I'm just starting with the first work by GMT.
Yeah, MGT of America.
I think we really should have those notebooks, which they were only about this big, for each of our new board members to review, just to see how all our facilities were ranked on the 4 categories.
They're online. They can look
they
at
can-
them on our website.
But for those people that like a book,
Yeah.
printable, it's kind of fun to look through. But just from that process all the way through the facilities task force, and those people still reach out to me that say, when are we meeting again, and when are we, when are we going to look at all this again? But they're very proud of that work. And then he says each of our buildings have had the groundbreaking and the ribbon cutting. A lot of work has gone on, and a lot of thanks to all the team of SPS that's made this happen. And then the progress is promised. I mean, that's a well-known phrase now, and it's worked well. I mean, there's been some hiccups along the way, but not that significant. So
Yeah, it becomes more challenging every day. Labor and materials and lead times. So we're very hopeful that we finish up our York, Garrett, and Hillcrest by the end of December. But we do face challenges daily that are outside of our control. And so it's a very different construction industry now than it was 3 years ago when we began this work. Very different.
Okay. Oh, excellent. Any other comments or questions?
Great work.
Okay, we'll keep moving on. So there's an information report. We don't need to take action, but we always love this information. So we'll move on now to 12.01, Superintendent's Update.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, last Thursday I had the wonderful opportunity to have a 4th grade student from McBride, Charlie Langston, to shadow me for today. So he spent the day with me as superintendent. All of you are aware Charlie was here last fall and actually led the pledge, and I met him when I was out visiting McBride. And so we started our day at Good Morning Springfield, and we participated in graduation practice at Parkview. We surprised a couple of teachers with some Keep On Growing awards, and then we recognized our bookmark winners from our schools in honor of National Library Month, which was celebrated in April. So we had a great day, and like I said, it started with Charlie reaching out saying, I've been principal for today, how can I now be superintendent for today? So I want to thank Charlie and his parents for allowing him, and his principal and teacher for excusing him from class to spend the day with the superintendent. The last day of school is Wednesday, May 25th. It will be a full day of instruction. I want to thank board members, parents, community members for joining us on last week for our graduation ceremonies, where we had over 1,800 students to graduate. So really excited. It was 5 great events. We have another graduation ceremony tomorrow for Studi Alternative High School. And so that will conclude our graduations for this year. We have about 8,000 students registered for our Summer Explore program. Really excited about that, about 600 of those students being kindergarten students. We do have options for students for Summer Explore, either virtual options or seated instruction. So please feel free to continue to enroll. Explore opens on the first day of Explore is Monday, June 6th, and so we're really excited about that. But what I'm most excited about are book giveaways. I get excited about some things, and I think Kelly told me a couple weeks ago when I was explaining another instructional thing we were talking about, but all of our kindergarten and 1st grade students will have an opportunity to take a little backpack home or a little bag of books for our summer reading program. Then all of our rising kindergartners that attend Explore will have an opportunity also to receive a packet, and our beautiful big red Clifford friend, Clifford the big red dog. I'll get it right in a minute.
Get it right, because Clifford will email you.
Yes, he will. We'll be visiting Explore programs in July. But once again, every kindergarten and first grade student, well, we have some, we were actually starting the distribution tomorrow, but I think a few schools got excited from what I see on Twitter, and they have already started passing them out, which is great. But students will actually go home with books, and eventually we'll add additional grade levels next summer. But I want to thank our team for working to make that a reality. I still believe students need also actual physical books and everything, so really excited about that. And I encourage our students to read, and I encourage everyone else to read this summer. Thank you.
Good. Excellent, thank you. And we'll move on to, behind, legislative update.
Yes, we have Jason Zampius here today to, as you're aware, the session concluded last Friday, and so Jason's here just to give us a high-level overview of how the session ended and things that might impact public education. Jason?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you. I've been working in the Capitol for 18 years, and I have to tell you, this is the most unique legislative session I've ever seen. And I have a colleague who's been working there for 55 years, and he would agree to the same.
Wow.
This year, this session, there were over 2,200 bills that were filed in the legislature, both House and Senate combined, of which only 66 bills, including appropriations measures, which make up almost 20 of those, only those 66 made it to the governor's desk, which represents roughly about a 3% passage rate for the legislature this year. So you can draw your own conclusions as to their effectiveness. Unfortunately, this year at the onset represented what was potentially one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, sessions for public education, at least in recent history. Without question, there were more bills filed that touched upon or related directly to K through 12 public education than any other subject matter that was filed in the legislature this year. The proposals that range from prohibiting CRT, expanding and increasing funding for charter schools, expanding virtual education opportunities, open enrollment proposals, parents' bills of rights, school board member recalls, and dealing with meeting agendas for school boards, gender identity in high school sports. The list just goes on and on as to issues that related to public education that were within the purview of the legislature this year. Fortunately, of all of those proposals, only 3 major public education bills actually made their way to the governor's desk. Those were Senate Bill 681, which was sponsored by Cindy O'Loughlin, Senator O'Loughlin, who's the Senate Education Chairwoman. Senate Bill 718, which was sponsored by Senator Barbara Washington, and House Bill 1552, which was sponsored by Representative Doug Ritchie. I can run through 2 of the bills were what we refer to as omnibus bills. Senator O'Loughlin's bill was one of the biggest omnibus bills I've ever seen. It looks like a small phone book. It's just massive. It was originally filed as a reading, intervention, and instruction proposal, which I know Dr. Latham had an opportunity to sit down with the senator and give some comments as to some of the provisions contained within the bill. But as the bill worked its way through the process, when it made it over to the House, the committee added, I think it was somewhere in the range of about 29 other bills to her bill. Then it went to the Senate or the House floor, where another, I think, 21 were added. So you're looking at a bill that was a single subject bill that now has 50 different bills with numerous provisions from each of those bills now contained within it. Once the bill was taken to conference, they removed somewhere in the range of about 22 of those provisions, but still just a giant bill. In addition to the reading intervention, it now contains provisions dealing with school innovation waivers, child abuse reports, and the use of corporal punishment in public schools, mandatory Holocaust education, creating a process to allow community members to place topics on school board agendas, school board subdistricts, mandatory gifted programs, Braille instruction, pilot recovery high schools, a visiting scholars teacher program to try to address hard-to-staff schools and subjects, a 4-year certification for substitute teachers, superintendent sharing, mandatory high school computer science courses, a student transportation ride-sharing agreement proposal, which is like Uber for high schools, I guess. That was actually a idea that came from Senator Bean from the Boot Hill of Missouri, where students spend a considerable amount of their day just on a school bus going to and from these very rural school districts. There's a provision in there that would require the bottom 5% of performing schools to notify parents of their performance as well as other educational opportunities in the area. I could go on and on, but those are some of the high points of that bill. There's also a provision in there that deals with the Get the Lead Out of School Act, which is something that I'll touch upon when we get to the budgetary side of what the legislature approved this year. But that is something that I think the school district here should certainly be concerned about. Perhaps the most pressing thing that Senate Bill 618 has in it is the reading intervention and instruction proposals. And the reason that I say it's the most pressing is because implementation has to be accomplished by January 1 of 2023. So it's a very quick turnaround to implement these new provisions of law. The second bill that I referenced, Senator Washington's Senate Bill 718, contained most of the same provisions as I've already mentioned in 618, except it also had a provision dealing with dual credit and dual enrollment scholarships. And then finally, Doug Ritchie's House Bill 1552 started out as a charter school funding equity proposal. Originally, it would have taken money from public schools in which there were charter schools that were located, mainly to try to offset, I think, what were at least perceived inequities as far as local tax collections that the public school district was able to retain, whereas the charter schools weren't collecting any of those revenues. When the bill made its way to the Senate came up with a compromise that it would actually fund those inequities through a new line item within the foundation formula. So no longer would it be taking from the local school district, the state would make up that difference, which seemed like a great compromise. Unfortunately, they also added a provision that allowed for virtual education expansion. And most notably, it touched, I think, least favorably upon full-time virtual instruction. In that regard, it basically took away the gatekeeper function of the resident district. And now only the virtual provider would be able to actually remove a kid from a program based on the fact that the educational outcomes weren't what they had anticipated. Aside from that, there were a whole host of really bad things that could have happened. And fortunately, I'd like to take a lot of credit that I'm just this fantastic lobbyist and I could stop all of these bad things from happening. But really, it came down to the fact that the Senate really failed to function in any meaningful way for most of the session. And so while a lot of these bills were House proposals and made it their way through, I would say 65-70% of the legislative process, it was such a backlog that it resulted in a number of giant omnibus bills, and it didn't allow for enough time to fully vet a lot of the what I would characterize as really problematic and potentially dangerous proposals for public education.
They'll just come back up.
They absolutely can and most likely will. And so we were I think, very effective in dealing with some of the penalty provisions that were contained in proposals like the Parents' Bill of Rights. Some of the things that the legislature was trying to do under the guise of transparency, which there's nothing wrong with transparency at all, but the legislation is oftentimes filled with unintended consequences. And in many instances, they're legal consequences that would only end up costing public school districts. And so, like I said, we had a lot of success there. Whether or not that's going to be the topic du jour in politics next year after these upcoming elections remains to be seen. But, there's always issues that just kind of cycle through session after session, and so I would not be surprised to see a large chunk of those revisited next year. But switching to something slightly more positive out of Jeff City, there were a lot of positive developments as it relates to budgetary issues. So for the first time since 1999, the state fully funded the transportation categorical, with an increase of just over $215 million from the previous year's appropriation. It brings the total appropriations to just over $328 million. As I was driving down here from Jeff City, I had a call from the state budget director, and he was telling me, the transportation line, the House budget chair and the Senate appropriations chair both said this is likely just going to be a one-time thing. The state budget director kind of echoed that sentiment to some extent, although he said since it is coming out of GR, we're not going to have a rough year next year. We can expect to see an increase over last year's appropriation, maybe not full appropriation. He was less concerned about that being a, quote, one-time line item increase. In addition to that, there's $37.4 million for Career Ladder. One thing that I didn't touch upon, Senate Bill 681 actually increased the state's share of the match program. So currently it's a 40% state, 60% district match. They've actually switched that. So now it's 60% state, 40% district. And they've also decreased the number of years that it takes for a teacher to qualify for the program from 5 years to 2. So there were some positives in that omnibus bill from Senator O'Loughlin.
What is this? What do you mean match?
It's a state matching program. So
Matching for what?
Career ladder.
It's a grant program, the Career Ladder program.
The district puts in so much and the state puts in so much.
To fund the education to help them.
So it's salary that can be earned by doing extra things above and beyond the school day. It's a program that has existed for a long time in Missouri and then was defunded essentially. But schools opt in. There's kind of different qualifying things that teachers can do, work ball games, work parent
Oh,
events.
not professional development, not
No,
try to improve.
it's to earn additional
to earn
salary.
more. Okay, got it.
And it's actually funny because that segues nicely into the next line item that I was about to discuss. So in the governor's original proposed budget, he proposed $21.8 million to increase the starting salary for school teachers, which would have been a 70-30 match, 70 from the state, 30 from local school districts. In the budget bills, they always start out in the House. When the House got the budget bills, they took all of that money, actually decreased it somewhat, and put it into Career Ladder. When it came back to the Senate said, well, we're going to go increase Career Ladder and we're going to do the line item, the $21.8 million, to try to raise the minimum teacher pay. And this is a totally voluntary program. It'll be operated as a grant through DESE. And one thing the state budget director did tell me on my drive down here was that there were also conversations about this being a one-time thing. And he felt very firmly that this is not going to be a one, because it deals with salaries. Anything that is driven in the budget by salaries, that's always the last thing that gets cut out. Transportation, on the other hand, as we've seen historically, is probably one of the first things that goes. But again, this is something that he, when he heard that I was coming down to talk to you guys, he wanted me to emphasize the fact that this will be an ongoing item in the budget, and to the extent that you can take advantage of it, this is one of the governor's #1 priorities, is to advance starting teacher pay. And so it's worth looking into. I understand that most of if not all of your teachers are already at the 38,000 level, but there may be some paraprofessionals that could also take advantage of this program.
You have an alternate teacher schedule current for instructional technologists, ISS teachers, teacher interns, so we want to explore it.
In addition to that, the legislature appropriated $25 million to reimburse school districts for the costs incurred in implementing the reading, intervention, and instruction requirements that were placed upon it in Senate Bill 681. There's $5.5 million for design, renovation, construction, and improvements of technical, career technical or VOTEC schools with a 50% match requirement. There's $27 million in ARPA funds for testing, filtration, and remediation of lead in drinking water. That's something that obviously, with the requirements of Senate Bill 618, schools are going to have to be able to test and show that they can get detectable lead amounts down to 5 parts per million less. If they don't, there are remediation triggers that are within the legislation, including up to even having to buy bottled drinking water for the students until you can remediate the issue. And on top of that, let's not forget the roughly $60 million in ESSER funds that the legislature approved in the supplemental budget earlier this session. So while it wasn't everything we hoped it would be, there were some positive developments which occurred, and overall this session probably didn't turn out nearly as bad as certainly I anticipated. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
That was a lot. Is it possible, are you reading off something?
I had some notes, but
Oh, is it possible, so does this, so SB 681, 718, and House Bill 1552, so is the anticipation the governor will sign it?
so there is some question on 1552. I spoke with the governor.
No, the omnibus is 681.
I'm sorry, HB 1552 was the charter school funding equity, and then also the virtual school component. The governor's office had some significant concerns with the Senate's fix on the charter school funding piece, because I believe the fiscal estimate for that in year one was $60 million with an estimated 3% increase year over year. So just from a fiscal perspective, I think the governor's office had some concerns there. And as far as the other two, I haven't gotten any indication that there's any reason for the governor to veto either of those.
When is the when will we know?
So he has 45 days from the date of receipt if they send him the bills after they've adjourned sine die from session. If they send them while they're in session, it's 30. He's on a 30-day time clock. And so I couldn't tell you, because they haven't adjourned sine die yet, I can't tell you exactly the time frame, but I can give you an update as soon as that's available.
When it happens or doesn't happen, so for those bills that it does happen, is there any way you can send us a link to where to go see the comprehensive?
Oh, sure. So I provide...
That omnibus was...
Yeah, and actually I provide the board a weekly legislative update. It's a Excel spreadsheet. It has hyperlinks to each bill that I'm tracking, and it's color coded, so every week that there's activity for a given bill, it'll be highlighted in yellow. Crimson color means that it was withdrawn or defeated, and then obviously green means that it was truly agreed to and finally passed. But those hyperlinks will take you actually to the bill page of either the House of Representatives or the State Senate. That'll include all of the activity that's occurred for that given piece of legislation, the summaries of the various versions of the bills as they've moved through the legislative process. And if it's a House bill, they'll even include witnesses that have testified for and against with a brief summation of what their testimony.
Very user-friendly link page. We'll send it. We'll email it out in the board weekly update.
I think it usually gets attached probably after the meeting.
It does.
Yeah.
We can still send it as an email this
To our
week.
board docs.
Oh, I guess I don't go back.
But we'll send it as a part of the weekly update this week, though, okay? Okay. So you'll have it twice in the.
But I'm really interested after which ones actually get.
Also, actually, in a couple of weeks, you're talking about when once the governor signs.
Once the governor signs, because when I look
As
at
the
it.
governor takes action on any of the proposals that relate to public education, I'll send out an immediate alert to the board.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for coming down today.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to 13.01, Board of Education discussion. So, board comments. So we've had a busy week last week with graduations, which I know everyone had a chance to attend some of the graduations. So, and other things going on. Any comments at this time from board members? Awful quiet. It's been a long night.
Still have closed session. We still have closed session.
Okay, Brittany's ready to move along. I just want to hear if anyone had anything, but graduations were great.
Yeah, graduations are great.
Yeah. It's always a highlight for us, but.
Yeah, I appreciate all the work the staff put into it as well.
They were fun.
They were fun.
Staff does an awesome job. All of them went, or the three I attended just went so well, everyone. I mean, that doesn't happen without a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Everything goes. So, everyone, thank you. It's great. It's great fun for us just to get to go and see everything. Okay. Okay, upcoming meetings. So, upcoming meetings, we've already talked about Studi Alternative High School graduation, 1 o'clock at Studi. Those are awesome graduations if you can attend. We have a May 18th graduation at OTC Middle College.
Yes, the OTC Middle College is
And it's at the
tomorrow,
Gilloys. And then May 19, there's a district retirement reception, which is the second option. This is new for our district because Granita wanted to give that option for many of our retirees to have a 5:15 option because some couldn't come to the 4 o'clock. So that's awesome, an awesome opportunity for those. And then May 25th, last day of school. And then our next board meeting, a study session, will be June the 7th. So we'll see you all back here for that. Okay, then don't forget your plus and deltas. So if you have something that you would like to see we do a little differently or something that you liked, be sure and fill out a little post-it and give it to Tammy. And so at this time, we will move on to 15, vote to go into executive session. So the motion is, I need a motion that the board meet in executive session following this meeting to discuss real estate and collective bargaining matters as provided in section 610.0212, 9, and 12, RSMO. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Scott, and a second by Sharita. We will vote. People said, yep. Middle college? Okay. So